I'm a car salesman. Not necessarily by choice, it's just something that kind of fell into place. I work at a local dealer near the mall in town, one my dad's been running since before I was born. He loves cars and he loves to sell them, I guess, which sums up about why I work there. It isn't a bad gig, and I've been doing it long enough to get pretty good at it. I've had some pretty good sales in the past. Some felt a little scummier than others, but hey, it's the way the trade works. I don't make money if the cars don't sell, so it's in my best interest to do so. I was sitting at my desk when it started. It was a decent, but overall a slow day at the lot. The weather was nice, but I didn't get much of a chance to enjoy it because I hadn't had any sales all day. Not one. No young couple looking for a cheap ride. No bachelor looking for a lifted truck or sports car. No family scouting a replacement minivan. Nothing. So, I spent most of the day at my desk, twiddling my thumbs, listening to the radio, eyeing the lot in case someone happened to wander over. I was ready to get a sale, be productive instead of sitting around. My dad was out for the day, something about a golf outing with a competitor. He loved that stuff. Since I had the building to myself, I was hoping to put in some decent numbers, but on this particular day, there was nobody. I've had a lot on my mind recently, and the business would help clear the chaos in my head. So there I sat, dicking around as the hours crept by. That was until he showed up. I watched him arrive by bus, getting off the shuttle at the stop through the window. I had nothing going on, so I watched him after he showed up. He got off the bus and looked straight at the dealership, a slow, almost limp of a walk starting as soon as he saw my building. My first thought of him was your stereotypical boomer dad, and had to be pushing 60. What was left of his wispy hair was gelled and combed across a colossal bald spot. His eyes were shielded by bronze aviator glasses, and his outfit looked like it was ripped straight from an 80s business catalog. Khakis and old leather shoes, a floral print button-up that barely contained a large beer belly, and a Navy members-only jacket to tie it all together. He had his hands stuffed in the pockets of his jacket, and he was on a mission. While he drew closer to the dealer, I combed my hair, spit out my gum, and straightened my tie. It was evident he was coming this way, but he was heading straight to the lot, probably to browse. I just took that as my cue to meet him. I pushed through the door and into the sunlight, feeling the breeze for the first time today. He was just standing there now, scanning. He didn't linger on anything very long. I would have to do some digging to get this sale moving. "How are we doing today?" I asked. "The name's Mark. I'll be your liaison for the day. Something I can help you find?" He just stood there ignoring me for a second, looking at the cars at his own uninterrupted pace. With the aviators and the double chin, he looked like a grumpy frog. There was something unsettling about him from the get-go. "I'm looking for a car," he said. "Can't seem to find it. This is my third dealer today," he said plainly, very to the point. I clapped my hands together, ready to start the routine I had done 100 times. "Well, this is your lucky day. We currently have an abundance of—" "I'm not here for the sales pitch, kid." He cut me off, taking slow steps towards the shiny hatchbacks. Certainly there's some way I can help. I know all the makes and models in this lot. We happen to be sitting on quite a bit, and let me tell you, now is a good time to be on the market." I started, turning around to face the luxury sedans. "We looking for something sleek, for cruising, or maybe something a little sportier? Surely an old top like yourself would." I turned back to see he was already walking away. I felt a twinge of frustration. I'd have to work a little harder to get this guy to play ball. I scratched my head and caught up with him, walking quicker so I could lead. "The mini SUVs are one of our most popular items. Plenty of room for passengers, cargo in the back, all-wheel drive too. I can't recommend that enough. You know how winter can be around here," I said. The man just looked ahead, chewing his lip a little. The wind blew at his comb strands, but he didn't seem to mind. "Heated seats, Bluetooth. Some of these even have TVs in them. They make the commute more enjoyable, more satisfying. No interest in the first 12 months if you buy before the fall. We're at the tail end of our summer sale, but there's still time. Even if you need time to think something over, I'll get you taken care of. What do you do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?" Finally, he looked in my direction, but his face was still blank, almost like stone. "I was a car salesman. I'm retired now." He kept walking. "You've got to be kidding me," I thought to myself. This guy already knew the game. The tactics wouldn't work here. I'd have to follow him around like a lost dog and lap up whatever he fed if I wanted any kind of sale today. We could be here all day, and he still might not get anything. I kept the enthusiasm going. "You don't say. Anywhere around here? Maybe you know my father?" I asked. The man had finally stopped at our little cluster of trade-ins from past transactions. The man looked them over one by one, the sun shining off his sunglasses as he panned slowly like an owl. He came to an old Buick and stopped. Fumbling in the pockets of his windbreaker, he pulled out a pack of cigarettes in his Zippo. "Oh, sir, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to put those away. We have a smoke-free premises," I said, but he continued anyway. He leisurely fished a cigarette out of the pack and lit it, taking a big drag before pointing to the Buick. "The LeSabre. Get me the keys." He blew the smoke out at me, and I waved it away. I looked at the car, a creeping anxiety washing over me. It was a '98 Buick LeSabre Limited, silver with tinted windows. This car, of all things? Was this a game? But pardon? The trade-in? I assure you we can find something better to suit you. Walk with me, there's quite a bit I can show you." "What's the deal with the price? 8,000? It blue books for 5 tops. I know you heard me. Get me the damn keys." He looked at me and took another drag. His tonal shift was alarming. I found myself glancing around. We were still alone. Yeah, right away. Let me get those for you." I briskly returned to the office for the key. I was sweating a little, trying to wrap my head around the old man's choice. The LeSabre of all cars. I thought about calling my dad, but decided against it. He'd flip out, ask too many questions, want to know every little detail about what was going on. When I came back, he was peering through the windows of the car, his cigarette snubbed out on the pavement. I wanted to scowl at it, but I kept my cool. I still wanted to get something out of the guy. I just had to figure out how. "Looks clean. Really clean," he said as he peered through the driver's side window. "They all are," I said, scratching the back of my head as I looked across the lot. The SUVs wouldn't do it. He was too old for a really smart car. I had a feeling the digital stuff would scare him away. Maybe the Lincolns? The old man was looking at the paper that was taped to the inside of the windshield, the one below the large "for sale" sign. It displayed the mileage and terms of sale, as in no warranty, stuff like that. It was a trade-in after all. "Well, let's take a look, shall we?" He was leaning on the car now, waiting for me to unlock it. "Sure thing." I smiled and worked the key, looking inside myself to make sure nothing was amiss. The front seat floors were still covered with paper shields to ward off shoe scuffs, and the back seat was nice and clean, just as I hoped. "Here she is." I reluctantly held the door for him, and he ducked his head in. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. It was those damn sunglasses. You couldn't see anything behind them. He chewed his lips as he looked up and down the dash. Then his gaze held on the seats. They were tan leather, a clean shine still catching the light. Leather seats, very clean. Back in my day, these used to drive the girls wild, he said under his breath, and I started to feel uncomfortable. So many skirts in these back seats. He clicked his tongue and ran a finger down the clean leather. He looked at his fingertip and rubbed it against his thumb as if trying to feel dirt. Oh, yeah? Is that so? I played along, wiping sweat from my brow. Yeah, of course, he continued. You ever get a dame in the back seat of one of these, kid? He asked, a grin forming on his wrinkled, stubbled chin. It gave me the chills. I'm afraid not. I gave a nervous laugh. Say, a few rows down, we have the Lincoln Town Car. A few of them, actually, even in silver, too. Of course, he wasn't listening. With a labored wheeze, he leaned in and hit the button for the trunk. There was a soft clink when the trunk popped, and he immediately walked around me toward the rear of the car. He stood in front of the trunk with it cracked a little, as if he didn't want to open it. He ran his thumb over the paint, then over the temporary license plate. When his thumb reached the dealership sticker, he stopped for a moment. The sticker was the silhouette of a diamond. He looked at me, still frowning. Oh, there it is, namesake of the business. You know, diamond deals. It was my dad's idea. I still think it's pretty cheesy if I'm being honest, I said, unable to shake the feeling of nervousness. The old man seemed taken aback. Yeah, there's that. He looked at the sign, then lifted the lid of the trunk. As he stared in the trunk, I found myself following and looking as well. The same silent stare. The trunk was empty, and there was a clear view to the little carpet hatch that led to the spare. The old man ran a finger over the carpet. Plenty of room in there, isn't there? He asked. He was looking tired. Perhaps the sun was getting to him. Yeah, I suppose there is. Good going for town car, I guess. Plenty of room for groceries. Or a woman, he spoke. It stood the hair up on the back of my neck. Excuse me? I asked. You heard me. He looked at me, then slammed the trunk shut. It was loud, and I jumped a little. Sir, I think it's time I asked you to leave, I stammered, feeling a ball in my throat. I instinctively felt for my phone, and the old man stared and scratched at his stubbled chin. Leave? Who said I was leaving? I'm not finished here. He shoved past me and walked back to the driver's side. He dug in his pocket again, this time pulling a full half-pint of whiskey. He twisted the cap and broke the seal before taking a swig. I could only watch in disbelief. Hey, I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, but it's time for you to go. I'm calling the police. I pulled out my phone while he screwed the cap back on. Don't worry, I'll call him, he said, pocketing the whiskey and pulling out his own flip phone. What? I said, I'll call him. Don't worry about it, kid. I'll handle it. He flipped his phone open. I mulled it over in my head, sweating more and more as my confusion built. Wait, that's not necessary. We can figure something out, I'm sure. I put mine away and held my hands up. The old grumpy man looked at me, and after a time, his phone snapped shut. He dug out another cigarette and lit it. I scratched my sweaty head and looked around, but it was just us on the lot. When's the last time you drove this, kid? He asked. What? The Buick. You ever take her for a spin? After hours? When Daddy's not looking? He growled, his voice getting lower, like he was whispering. What? No, I've never driven this car before, I told him. Huh, that's funny. All these cars in the lot, and the only one without dust on the paint is this one. It's still got shine on the tires. Why'd you spray that on there? Pretty it up? Why do that if it's overpriced? You only pretty up the frontliners, kid. He was moving closer, the cigarette smoke dancing on the wind. I told you, I haven't driven this car. Only around the lot, like the others. Another thing, kid. The paper on the window said it's got 130,715 miles. He rasped. Yeah, and? I demanded. Dash says 747. He took another drag. So what? The Carfax is off then. It's 32 miles. Who gives a shit? I'll print out a new one. I told you that the car's getting moved around. Yeah, maybe a block or so. Unless there's a maintenance issue. But you know what? There's a couple of bars in town, only a few miles away. You ever take her out for a spin, kid? Clean her up? Impress the girls? He was taking another drink, and my hands were starting to shake. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Let me tell you a story, kid. Real quick. Like I said, I was a car salesman too. I get it. I was there once. And I was damn good too. But I tell you what else. I was a total piece of shit husband and a worse father. I didn't give a damn about my kid. Not really. They were just things that happened. The cars, on the other hand, I lived for those cars. That's what I loved, and I got divorced a long time ago. Me and the wife never talk. My daughter, she must be a little younger than you, he said. He was talking much faster now, raising his voice. Anyway, my ex calls me yesterday. We haven't spoken in years. She tells me our kid hasn't come home. She thinks she's missing. Said she called the cops. They didn't do shit, as far as I know. Yeah, so what? What's that got to do with me, huh? I was getting loud, my voice echoing in the lot. I could feel the anxiety setting in. Thing is, her date picked her up that night, like a gentleman, car all done up, spick and span. Was the last time she saw her. Said he was driving an old silver Buick. Said there was a sticker on the bumper, like a symbol. She wasn't sure. It was dark out. But as it turns out, on the third dealer, I found it. I looked at the large spinning sign, the glimmering letters, Diamond Deals. I couldn't breathe. So, I think it's time to come clean. He took a last drag and snubbed it out. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I think you do. Maybe your daddy ain't quite figured it out, but he will. He know you marked the price up on that car to keep the eyes off of it. Screw you. I clenched my fist. Sure, you only put a couple of miles on. Bar's not that far. But I tell you what, you know what else ain't that far away? The river. You could be there in 10 minutes. So what happened, kid? You pushed too far? She reject you? You're wrong, I said, tears welling in my eyes. No, I'm not. This car's probably the cleanest on the lot. It's been vacuumed at least 3 times, and the outside's shiny and new. You don't wash the trade-ins, kid. They're not worth the effort. How long till Daddy finds out? You think he'll like that? You messing up that bad?" It was an accident," was all I said. "Brat like yourself. Maybe not used to hearing the word no. She hurt your feelings? Take you down a peg? Big man like yourself?" I told you it was an accident." I felt my knees buckling. Suddenly it was hard to stand. "Sure thing, kid. I'm gonna cut to the chase. I'm calling the police either way, either now or when I'm on the way home on the next bus. They'll take everything I know, and they'll find her wherever she is. But it ain't gonna be quick. They'll drag you and your father through the mud the whole process. You'll be finished," he said, and my legs could no longer hold the weight of the stress and guilt. I started sobbing, burying my face in my hands. "What do you want me to do? I can't undo what I've done." At some point, he was standing next to me, getting one last thing from his pockets. Through tears and shame, I could see the pistol, a little .38 snub-nose. "I won't lie and tell you I was there for my daughter growing up. I wasn't, and I know that. But she was still my daughter. I'm just doing what's right. It's the least I can do. But I'm no killer. You want to know what I want you to do? Atone for your mistake. Make sure it doesn't happen again. It seems like a better alternative to carrying the weight and rotting in prison, don't it? Either way, it's up to you. I did my part," he said, and held the gun out. I took it and cradled it in my trembling hands. The old man sighed, retrieved the whiskey, and downed it in a large gulp. He winced behind his glasses, and there was the glimmer of a tear behind the lens. He tossed the bottle into the parking lot and walked away, lighting a cigarette without another word. Through puffy eyes, I watched him go, the same limp taking him to the bus stop he arrived on. Without as much as a look back, he sat on the bench and waited for the next shuttle. I climbed to my feet and went back into the office. I collected my things and locked up for the day, closing the dealership early. When I came back out, he was gone. The bus bench was empty, like he was never even here. The pistol in my pocket and the booze bottle in the parking lot reminded me of his visit, almost assuring me of what had to be done next. I got in the Buick and drove home. It took me some time to process it all, but by the time I got home, I knew what I had to do. I sat down and wrote this, hopefully to clear up any questions for those that come looking for me. I know I'm a piece of shit and I did what I did. There's nothing I can do to fix that now. I'm sorry, really. I was in denial at first, and I tried my best to cover it up because I was scared. Scared of what I did and the repercussions that would follow if it was discovered. I've got a bunch of missed calls on my phone now. Too many to go through, and to be honest, there's no need. I've made my decision. There's a little bar on the outskirts of town called the Six Shot, with a little red neon sign. If you head east for 8 miles or so, there's a small bridge with a river running underneath. She's under the bridge. I tried to use some rocks to weigh her down, and I hope she's still there. I'm sorry. She deserved much better. And well, that's about all I have to say. I've learned from my mistake. I won't hurt anybody again. I've got the pistol on the desk now, and once I post this, I'm gonna take the deal the old man gave me. At least that way I can try and set things right. He did say he was a damn good salesman. Goodbye. I'll be the first to admit it. We were bad kids. I spent a lot of time with Evan, Gary, Josh, and Rob during my developing years, and we were an absolute pain in the ass. Evan always had some insane idea, and we all just pushed each other to do worse and worse. One day, we could challenge each other to break a window. The next, we might set someone's dog loose. We once caught a badger and locked it in our gym teacher's car. I know, it was awful. We never really considered how others would feel. In our minds, it was always about pushing our limits. This wasn't about how we treated others. We were selfish. It was summer. I was 12 years old, and it was the first time it all got really out of hand. Evan had found his dad's handgun, an old revolver. He'd loaded it with 6 bullets, and we were going down to the old storage yard to shoot some cans. The place had been abandoned for years, and all that remained were empty storage containers. Most of them had been stuck there since the 70s, rusted shut. We all got a turn with the gun. Gary hit a glass bottle spot on. Josh hit one, but it didn't shatter. Rob missed altogether. I shot a can, making it flip. We were cheering and passing it around, pretending to be action heroes. With 2 bullets left, it was Evan's turn. He'd brought the gun to begin with, so we argued he should get 2 shots. He posed with it like he was the Terminator. "I got a challenge for you assholes," he grinned. "One of you gotta sleep in the container." "No way," said Gary. "That's gross. Rats everywhere." "Yeah, screw that," said Josh. "No one's doing that." Evan pulled the trigger and shot straight into the ground. Nobody was ready for it, so we all stepped back. There was smoke coming from the hole in the ground. He held the gun up, pointing it at us one after another. "We need a volunteer. Or, we could play Russian roulette. You want to go first?" He was pointing the gun at me, and I almost pissed myself. "Oh, for heaven's sake," yelled Rob. "Fine, I'll do it. Put the gun down." Evan just smiled. "That's all I wanted," he said. "We'll pick you up tomorrow." Evan found the oldest, grossest storage container in the yard. It was sunk into a big oil-filled puddle and was covered in so much graffiti you couldn't see the original color. It had been stuck there for decades. We all had to pull to even open up the doors enough for someone to slip in. The smell is what stuck with me. Air is not supposed to smell like that. Rob slipped in and almost fell. The container was at a steep angle, so he just laid down to keep his balance. Evan, please, Rob, I brought a gun. Josh broke into a car last week. You're the only one being a pussy. I just... Evan slammed the door shut. He laughed so hard that we just followed along nervously. Lots of nervous laughter. We left the storage yard. Evan put the gun back, and we went out to have ice cream. I wasn't worried about Rob. We'd done worse things to each other once a week since we were 7. Still, if Rob hadn't stepped in, I would have been the one to spend the night in that storage container. I'm not gonna go too deep into the details of what happened next, but we came back the next day to discover something. Did you know that rust sucks up oxygen? That storage container was rusted all the way through. I've never been so terrified in my life. Opening that storage container and seeing that pale face peeking out from a blue pastel-colored hoodie. We called the police. There was a forensics team. We all told the truth, and we were told it was all just a tragic accident. Evan tried to make it sound like Rob wanted to do it. I told it like it was. A challenge. We did them all the time. The local police knew all about our antics, but this had crossed a line that they hadn't anticipated. Gary moved out of town a year later, and Josh was transferred to another school. Evan had to repeat 1 year of school, so we kinda just lost him. In just 1 year, I was the only one of the old gang left. My entire personality changed. I was having trouble with nightmares. I could imagine myself being stuck in that storage container, feeling my lungs fill up with metal dust, that awful acidic metallic smell, the slanted floor, taking me further and further away from the light above, sinking ever deeper. I had to go to therapy. For years, I just tried to have a normal life. My parents were very supportive. They were proud, in a way, that I'd told the truth and owned up to our mistakes. They didn't blame me for what happened, even if they were deeply disappointed. They just knew we were being idiots, and they knew just as well that I would never be that person again. I wish it had been that simple. As I grew out of my teenage years, I would look back on the time with the gang in shame. The other guys didn't have as much luck as I did. Gary was put in juvie for a Grand Theft Auto charge at 17. Evan dropped out of high school in a matter of weeks. Josh did pretty well for himself, but he was still a bit of an outcast at the other school. Turns out he came out as gay, and there were plenty of people who had a problem with that. There's always a gang. If not us, then someone else. One by one, they seemed to fall off the face of the earth. Gary was first. He died in juvie, strangled in the shower. There were a few suspects, but there was no definite conclusion. Evan shot himself in the bathroom at his part-time job downtown. His note just told everyone to go screw themselves. A year ago, the only other living member of our old gang was Josh, and I hadn't spoken to him for over a decade. I accidentally met him at a cafe not too long ago, and we decided to sit down and catch up. I mentioned my girlfriend, Rosie, and he talked at length about his engagement to a guy named Harold. They were planning a move to Wisconsin together. I noticed, however, that talking about it just turned the conversation sour. Josh just shook his head. "I don't know if we'll make it," he said. "Things are weird." "Weird how?" "You ever think about him?" He didn't have to clarify who he was talking about. Of course it was Rob, our eternal him. The images flashed before my eyes. The bottom of the container, my feet wet, choking. I'd never been there, but it felt like something inside me had. All the time, I admit. "Do you think he thinks about us?" The question caught me off guard. Seeing my confusion, Josh just smiled and waved it aside. "Never mind," he smiled. "Let me get the check." 2 months later, Josh was dead, drowned in the bathtub. He never made it to Wisconsin with Harold. That's when my life turned to shit. I started having recurring dreams about that storage container. I'd imagine myself standing at the rusted door, looking down. I would see all of their faces, pale and lifeless, staring up at me. Something was forcing my body to step inside, to join them. No matter how hard I tried, I'd always step in. The steep metal floor would make me slip, and just as my feet touched their grasping hands, I'd wake up. There'd be handprints all over my pillow. Rust. 2 weeks after Josh's funeral, I got a letter. It was posthumously sent to me as part of his will. The paper was covered in rusty handprints and was scribbled in a panic. My name was at the top of the paper. "Don't stay in one place too long. He's looking for you." That was the first line. The thing was written like a list. "Sleep in the bathroom. There's less buildup. That explains why he was found there. Try not to sleep. That's when he comes looking." Another explanation. He must have fallen asleep in the tub, exhausted. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Don't tell Harold. Be careful. I didn't think I'd sleep that night, but I did. I was so stressed that my body just exhausted itself. My heart had been pounding for hours, and the adrenaline was taking its toll. Oddly enough, the sleep was completely dreamless. I felt completely aware of the room I was in and my surroundings, which is why I reacted so fast when the bathroom door opened. Someone was in my apartment. I shot out of bed, grabbed my keys and phone, and just ran. I ran out into the stairwell and was overwhelmed with an awful metallic smell. I almost choked and had to steady myself against the wall. I looked back. There he was, just as we'd left him, same pastel blue hoodie, a pale face leaking with rust, streaks of red out of his ears, nose, mouth, and eyes. The hair on the left side of his head stuck straight up, like he'd slept in a weird angle. He was there for me. I could feel my joints aching. I hurried down the stairs and felt something in my left knee snap. I fell, but I managed to catch myself. Light bulbs started to pop. Things were going dark and the air was growing stale. I couldn't put any weight on my leg, but I hobbled my way down to the first floor. I was living my nightmare. Darkness closing in. Something grasping to drag me down. I burst through the door and into the cool night. Once I got outside, I threw up. Rust. I coughed. More rust. It's been weeks now. I've lived my life by Josh's note. If I stay for longer than a few nights in the same place, it all gets covered in rust, and my cough gets worse. I can't keep anything near me, or the rust gets to it. It gets more active when I sleep. I once fell asleep in my car and the damn thing was ruined in the morning. Even the keys. I sometimes see that blue hoodie in passing. It might be on the side of the road, or across the street from whatever acquaintance or distant family member that's kind enough to take me in for the night. He's looking for me. He's not fast, but he's coming. He saved me for last. I sleep in the bathroom, but I don't fill the bathtub with water. I've learned from Josh's mistakes. There is still some rust buildup, but if I've gotten enough distance, I can usually stay there for an extra day if I've been vigilant. I take the bus or train as often as I can. I can't keep buying cars, and after ruining a third rental, there's no one willing to help me out anymore. Caffeine pills are literal lifesavers, but I don't know how much my heart can take. I'm tired. I'm so damn tired. My left knee is still ruined, and it aches. I once scraped it from a bad fall, and I'm still not sure if it was blood or rust coming out. It flaked like rust. I don't know what to do. I'm posting this from the computer of a public library. I've written this in a hurry, but there's already rust building up. The damn E key keeps getting stuck. My cough is getting worse. I barely sleep and my hands are just covered in rust. I've washed my hands so much I'm getting rashes, but the rust just keeps coming back. There's a storm coming tonight, so I don't think there'll be any trains or buses leaving anytime soon. I'll try to walk for as long as I can, but I'm afraid I'll collapse on the side of the road. I'll try to hitchhike, but I don't want to put someone in danger. My family has no idea where I am or what I'm doing. Rosie is going crazy with worry. I don't know why my first instinct in all of this was to get away from friends and family, but I just don't want to drag anyone into this unless they know what this is, you know? I'm thinking I should do what Josh did, just in case. Write it all down. That's why I'm here. This cough is killing me. Grates against my lungs. I'm pale like a ghost. Please help. I don't know how much time I've got. It hasn't even been a day since I first laid eyes upon it. I was dropping my girlfriend off for her last in-person yoga class before everything went back on lockdown for the winter, when a portrait hanging in the display window of the shop across the street unexpectedly caught my attention. It was an 18 by 24-inch expressionist painting of a black humanoid creature with poorly defined edges and features, like it was bleeding into the shadows around it. It was tall, gaunt, and hunched, dressed in a tattered hood and mantle that vaguely resembled a set of wings. It lacked all facial features save for a pair of misty white eyes, the only part of its body that wasn't black. It held a lumpy sack in one hand, and in the other, it plucked up a child between two of its long, Dr. Seuss-esque fingers. The child was bruised and bloodied, and undeniably terrified for its life, but no motive could be inferred from the stance of its tormentor. The whole scene was reminiscent of Saturn devouring his children, only with Saturn reimagined as some sort of Lovecraftian boogeyman. My interest sufficiently piqued, I decided to go inside for a closer look. The shop in question was Orville's old-fashioned oddity outlet, and was mildly infamous for selling strange items of questionable authenticity. Ever since I'd first started taking my girlfriend to the neighboring Eve's Eden of Esoterica, I often found myself wondering how old Orville managed to stay in business. His oddity shop rarely seemed busy, and from what I could tell, most people agreed that his merchandise was overpriced hokum. It could have just been that Orville was living off an inheritance or something and was operating his business at a loss for the hell of it, or that the runoff from Eve's was enough to keep him afloat. But a quick glance at the local paranormal forum, HeroicHallows.net, produced photographs of some of our town's wealthiest residents visiting the shop, along with a handful of other mysterious figures who nobody recognized. Everything from cloaked cultists to colorful clown girls have been seen making after-hours visits to Orville's. So maybe, just maybe, a few of Orville's high-end items were legit, and the occasional sale to a select clientele was all he needed to stay in business. It was a fun little thought as I stepped through the door, paying no heed to the large caveat emptor emblazoned upon it. VHS tapes? What am I supposed to do with VHS tapes? I heard a gruff voice ask. I turned towards it and saw an old man in a garish pastel suit, with his feet upon his desk and a phone in his hand. With his other hand, he indicated that he would be with me in one moment. Nobody has a VCR anymore, so what good would? You have a VCR to go with the tape collection? And what's his deal? Of course you can't set the clock. There's nothing paranormal about that. Listen, what are you trying to sell? The tapes? Or what's on the tapes? Because if it's what's on the tapes, then maybe you could. Yeah? Uh-huh. Well, I'll never be able to move them as a general item if I gotta convince people to buy an obsolete VCR to go with them. I might be able to broker a deal for a specific buyer, but I'll need more information. Not now, though. I've got a customer. I'll call you back. I said, no. If you put a piece of Scotch tape over the remove tab, you can tape over it again. If there's tape residue, then it could have already been taped over, but it could just be from an old label. How would I know? Yeah, you go figure that out. I gotta go. Bye." He hung up the receiver on the cradle of a bronze mahogany rotary phone before folding his fingers and giving me his full attention. "Honestly, the thing some of these jerks try to unload on me," he said with a roll of his eyes. "Anywho, can I help you find anything, young man?" Yeah, actually, I was wondering about that painting in the window," I replied, pointing to the display behind me. "Oh, you mean the self-portrait of Rancorus Ruck?" The old man flashed me a devious smile before donning an iridescent tragedy mask with a surgery mask fixed to the inside. Self-portrait?" I asked skeptically. "Absolutely," he said, rising from his seat and leading me towards the painting. "Cryptids and monsters are notoriously difficult to get decent photographs of, and that was a bit of a problem for old Rancor here. He can't exist in the real world unless he already exists in the mind of a suitable host, let's say. He's sustained by thoughts about him and uses his host's innate mental energy to manifest a physical form for himself. This presents a bit of a catch-22, since he needs people to know about him to exist, but existing is kind of a prerequisite for people to know about you. What's a damn thought form to do? If you're a thought-based murder monster with an artistic streak like Rancorus Ruck here, you leave a self-portrait behind as a calling card. That way, even after your host is pushing up daisies, another one is bound to come along sooner or later and end up getting you stuck in their head." He took the portrait down from the easel and allowed me to get a better look at it, taking care not to look at it himself. The first thing I noticed was that the lumps of the sack were much more clearly hands or feet, or even faces pushing against it from the inside. The bottom of the sack was wet and dripping with a dark fluid, presumably blood, and the background showed many small sets of footprints running rapidly in all directions. Finally, in the corner, I could make the signature of the artist in the same stark white as the creature's eyes. Rancorus Ruck, self-portrait, September 1947. "So you're claiming that the creature in the portrait is the artist, and it leaves these paintings behind as a way to infect other victims?" I asked incredulously. "That's right, and anyone with a lick of sense or concern for their fellow human beings burns them, so they're very rare," Orville replied. "I know what you're thinking. Why in the world would anyone pay $1,300 for a cursed painting? $1,300? Before taxes and various fees and surcharges, yeah. The reason is that since old Rancor is sustained by your thoughts, you're able to exert some control over how he manifests. The more you study this portrait, the more of Rancorus you take into yourself, and if you're strong enough, the more of him you can bend to your will. Potentially very useful, or, life-saving, if he decides to come after you, which he probably will, since you've taken such an interest in his handiwork. Good luck getting him out of your head now. Seriously though, your best bet is to buy the painting and study every square inch of it until your eyes are bloodshot, put in some eye drops, and keep studying." I was more than a little confused by Orville's sales pitch of, buy this possessed painting in the hopes of inoculating yourself against the demon first. I didn't really believe him, but I did find the story mildly entertaining. As for the painting itself, I genuinely liked it. It was delightfully macabre, and I was curious about why the artist would have titled it a self-portrait. I could tell that it was an actual painting and not a print, so even though I would have liked some actual provenance on the piece, $1,300 wasn't really an outrageous asking price for a decent work by an unknown artist. As much as I hate myself for it, I ended up buying the damn thing, which came to almost $1,600 with all of Orville's taxes, fees, and surcharges. He wrapped it up very carefully, still taking the greatest of care not to look at it himself. I didn't want my girlfriend to see it, not because I was afraid of the curse, but because I was afraid of her cursing me out. Fortunately, when she came out of Eve's, She put her bags in the back seat of the trunk. I didn't really have a plan for what I would say if she had opened the trunk, but I got lucky. That was a fight we could save for another day. Once I had taken her home and gotten back to my own apartment, for some reason I took Orville's advice and carefully inspected the painting before hanging it up. It didn't really make any sense though, since there wasn't really anything to study. Rancorus Ruck was just a shadow person, and there didn't seem much more I could learn just by looking at him. If I squinted, I thought that maybe I could make out the outline of a belt, ragged sleeves, or the tattered hem of his hood, but that was it. I stared into the empty void of his face, thinking that if there was any hidden detail, that was where I'd find it. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see anything than those two white eyes. Since my thorough examination of the piece failed to yield any hidden secrets, I felt comfortably reassured that Orville had been full of crap. I even Googled Rancorus Ruck and got 0 results, which seemed a crushing blow to Orville's claim that there had ever been multiple paintings by an artist using that pseudonym. I was convinced the painting was a one-off by an unknown artist that had somehow found its way to Orville's shop, and he made up a story to go with it, as he did for all his wares. I did vaguely recall seeing something about a red ruck on the Heroic Hollows forum, but I didn't think too much of it. I figured both were just drawing inspiration from the same local legend. I tried taking a photo of the portrait with my phone to upload to the forum, and that was when things started to get weird. When I looked at the portrait through my phone, Ruck was nothing but an amorphous black cloud. There was nothing humanoid about his form at all, and the white bits that had been his eyes were now clearly just breaks in the cloud. I fiddled around with the settings and even the lighting in my room, but nothing could make Rancorus Ruck appear in the screen the way he did in the portrait. This got even more unsettling when I tried to take a photo or record a video. Each and every time, the file wouldn't save, no matter what I did. I tried saving it to the device, the SD card, the cloud, but nothing worked. At this point, I was starting to get a little freaked out, but there were still rational explanations to explore before accepting Orville's cockamamie story. Like, maybe the portrait wasn't from 1947 at all, but was far more modern and embedded with some machine-readable code for digital rights management. But that wasn't really how something like that would work, was it? I'd get a notification telling me I didn't have the rights to share the image. It wouldn't just inexplicably be unable to save files, and it certainly wouldn't automatically censor it the way it was doing. Could it have been a joke for a marketing scheme then? But that would still require somehow getting the software onto my phone. Maybe my phone was infected with malware and it was just a coincidence that the first thing I tried to take a photo of was this creepy painting. I mean, that was pretty much all I could think of aside from the obvious theories about losing my marbles. Frustrated, I tossed my phone aside and leaned in to examine the portrait once again to see if I could find anything that might explain the incongruity between what I was seeing and what the camera on my phone saw. I found myself staring into Ruck's eyes. The eyes that my phone said were nothing more than empty spaces in a shapeless black form. But they were too deliberately placed and shaped to be anything but eyes, and they had been painted a very distinct white to contrast with the darkness around them, making their presence undeniable. I could even make out the faint outline of pupils and irises, though I hadn't noticed them before. In fact, now that I was really looking at them, I could see that they even had corneas, each of which held the reflection of a vague, ghostly figure. It was astonishing, actually, how much detail had gone into eyes that would only be noticed up close. By then, I was really starting to wish that my girlfriend had discovered the painting. At least then I'd have a rational excuse to take it back to Orville's. Not that he would have taken it back. He was very clear that the only thing about his shop that wasn't real was his return policy. I tried to convince myself that I was being silly. The whole reason I bought the painting was because it was creepy, and if I had spent as much money on my phones as I had on it, maybe he would be able to take a decent picture of it. Sighing in defeat, I resigned myself to living with the portrait for at least one night. If it was still a problem in the light of day, I had tried to pawn it off as some gallery or museum for a tax deduction. Sleep, unsurprisingly, eluded me that night. Have you heard of the Tetris effect? It's when you have residual imagery of something you were really focused on, either in the dark or in your peripheral vision. Well, as I laid in the dark that night, I could see Rancorus Ruck. At first, it was just his eyes floating in the darkness, his body as amorphous as it had been on my phone. But gradually, he started to take shape. His head, his hood, and his mantle, then his limbs, his torso, and finally his sack all slowly emerged as distinct from the surrounding darkness, and I could see him as clearly as if I was looking at his portrait. The child, however, did not appear, leaving Ruck with a free hand. He held up his long fingers to his face to examine them, and I thought nothing of it, dismissing it as more hypnagogic imagery. Then he lowered his hands and looked towards me, and a smile of nothing more than a bright white line broke out across his face. He set his sack on the ground and began noisily rummaging through it, and as I drifted off to sleep, I remember thinking that it was very odd that a residual image on my retina should be able to make any noise at all. It was still night when I awoke again, still dark, but I could immediately tell something was wrong. My bedroom door was open when I knew I had closed it, and light was leaking in through the crack when I knew I had turned all the lights off. Panicking, I bolted out of bed and dashed into the living room, ready to confront any intruders with only my bare fists. My machismo vanished pretty quickly when I saw what was waiting for me in that room. In the sepia light of candles that I didn't own, I saw the hunched figure of Rancorus Ruck, working ardently at another self-portrait. His back was turned to me, and thus the painting was facing my direction. He had drawn himself emerging out of an inky black patch of mold on an old brick wall, wrapping his hand around the mouth of his victim, while brandishing a knife in the other. Even though his victim's face was mostly covered by his hand, there wasn't the slightest doubt in my mind that it was supposed to be me. He turned around to face me then, his face nothing more than 2 white dots, and a smile against an impenetrable black void. He held up his brush, heavy with paint that he carelessly let drip to my floor, and moved slightly to the side so that I could get a better view of his artwork. "I don't think I got your eyes quite right, boy," he mocked in a raspy voice. "I hope you can live with that." I didn't respond. Hell, I barely heard him, my heart was pounding so hard. My veins were flooded with adrenaline, but I couldn't will my limbs to move. I was practically catatonic, sweating and shivering as I stared wide-eyed at the monster painting in my living room. Ruck just snickered in contempt, turning his attention back to his painting, adding a few finishing touches. Only then, when his back was turned and I thought I actually had a chance, did I run. I ran to my apartment door and threw it open, only to see old Rancor casually standing in the doorframe, blocking my path. "Hello," he smirked, with an exaggerated wave of his long, mangy fingers. "Yes, Dr. Seuss-esque is what you called them, if I'm not mistaken. A colorful description, I must admit, even if it's not exactly what I was going for." I slammed the door shut, but it just went right through him, and he had somehow moved up slightly so that I had just shut him into the apartment with me. I had 2 choices then, either to fight him head on or try to reach the fire escape. For absolutely nothing remotely resembling a rational motive, I tried to throttle him and tackle him to the ground. Before I could even make contact, though, he slipped behind me with an ethereal ease and leapt onto my back, putting me into a chokehold and muffling my screams with his hand. I frantically tried to buck him off, slamming up against the wall and rolling upon the floor, but he clung to me with a dauntless and uncanny tenacity. It didn't take long for me to exhaust my oxygen supply like that, and I quickly lost consciousness. I wasn't dead, though. Not yet. I awoke at my desk, tied to my chair, with my laptop booted up and placed in front of me. It was still night, and I probably wasn't even out for more than a few minutes. I began frantically looking around for my attacker, and sure enough, he was standing over me with his arms crossed, waiting patiently for me to wake up. "What the hell are you?" I demanded, struggling against my bindings whilst on the verge of hyperventilation. "Exactly what Orville told you, or at least close enough that it's not worth going over again," he replied. He bent over and picked up his soggy, dripping sack, and I could see slowly writhing faces, hands, and other body parts pushing against it from the inside, moaning in dull anguish as they thrashed within their burlap prison. "See this? In here are all the minds of my old victims, and they're what keeps me going when the world forgets about me. You're going in here too, but not just yet. I have a small favor to ask of you first." "Screw you," I cursed, vehemently spitting at him. He backhanded me so hard my chair toppled over. I was too out of it for a second to notice him putting me back up, but apparently he did, because when I came back to my senses, I was looking at my computer again. "Orville was right, you know. Your thoughts sustain me. So all you had to do to beat me was not think of me as a monster," he taunted me, his smile twisting into a jagged white scrawl of chalk as he squeezed my cheeks with his prickly, slimy fingers. "A shame it's easier said than done. You have managed to make one non-trivial contribution to my being, though. Aside from the Sussesk fingers, you couldn't find a single search result when you Googled me, and in this day and age, one needs an online presence if one hopes to get anywhere. So here's the deal. I'm going to paint, and you're going to write. And if you come up with something postable by the time I've finished my painting, you'll get the privilege of going into my sack in one piece. But if you refuse..." He held his sack out to my face and pulled it open. Inside was an endless abyss of severed limbs, flayed skin, decapitated heads, and scalped faces, all of them still animate and aware. Worst of all, most of them looked like they had come from children. He snapped the bag shut again, and I tried to muster the courage to tell him to go to hell again, but I couldn't. And so, I'm writing this, Rancorus Ruck's debut post to the interwebs, exposing him to a bigger audience than his paintings ever could. I don't know if something written by someone else will infect people the same way his paintings do, but I really hope they don't. But if this post does infect people, please know that I'm truly sorry. The bastard's in my head now, and I'm not strong enough to resist him. Once I post this, I'm going in the sack. And maybe you think that's what I deserve for giving in to Rancor's demands. But if you pity me at all, and you ever happen to be in Somber Me, then please do me one favor. Burn Orville's shop to the ground. I should have known that something was off the moment I heard about the deal. In a time when used cars are going way above their market value, this one was practically a steal, Granted, it was through a friend of mine saying they had to move and were willing to give it away for cheap, and I was desperate to get my hands on a cheap car, so I guess I can't be blamed too harshly for that. The car by itself was old, and it was while I was cleaning out the back seat that I saw it. There was an unmarked cassette tape wedged in the crevice between the seats. It would have been easy to miss from another angle. I think I ended up dislodging it while shaking the back seat, making it visible in the first place. I withdrew it and saw that it was relatively undamaged. Quite surprising given how long it must have been there. My friend wasn't big into cassette tapes, as you can imagine, so it must have been the guy who owned it before him. My friend had told me that it had been owned by 2 other people. Thankfully, the car still started up when I put the keys in and ran with no real problems. While I was taking it for a short ride, my attention went to the cassette. It was unmarked, so what had been recorded on it? Curious, I inserted it into the player and pressed play. I had expected some old 90s song to start playing, but what started instead was a male voice.
Hello there. I don't know who you are who's listening to this, but I hope you're doing well. My name is Charles, and I hope you're having a nice day today.
There was the occasional sound of honking and the wind while the man was speaking, so he was probably recording while driving. The headlights flickered as the voice filled my ears, but I chalked it up to the car being old.
Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to talk for long. This is kind of a journal of sorts, I guess. I don't really know where to start with this, so that's why I think I'll just cut to the chase. I'm dying, and I have advanced blood cancer, and I don't have much time left.
My blood nearly froze. This was far more morbid than what I had been expecting.
So yeah, these are my final thoughts or something, I guess. I don't really have any close friends or family, so I guess you'll be the one sharing this last moment with me. I think that's enough for today. I'll tune back in later.
There was a pause and I began to panic. Though it had just been a short time, I was hooked and wanted to hear more. My first reaction, of course, was that it might have been some sort of prank, except I knew my friend very well. This wasn't the kind of joke he would have pulled, and there was something about the tone of the person's voice that I could hear even over the cassette that told me his grief was real. I just hoped that that wasn't all there was on the tape.
Right, I guess I forgot to mention this last time. Today is December 3rd, 2004. I mean, you have to do that in a journal, right? Anyway, I should clear things up here. This isn't some sort of memoir or anything where I'm gonna talk about my feelings or whatever. See, I might sound crazy, and maybe I am, but there is a way that I might be able to live. Granted, every single doctor I've been to has said otherwise, but there is another solution. It isn't something crazy like healing crystals or whatever, but I think that there are risks in dabbling with this method. So, if anything happens to me, and it might, I don't really have anyone with me who would really care. But I would want people to know what happened to me, just so that they don't make the same mistake I did, assuming I made a mistake at all. Sorry if I sound a bit confused, I'm having trouble composing my thoughts a little.
I began driving towards a road going through the nearby woods. There were no other cars in sight, which made me kind of nervous if this pile of junk decided to break down. But this road did get some traffic, so I was sure that I would be able to get some help at some point or another.
It started with my aunt. She was a witch, or at least she claimed to be. She would keep 3 black cats and was into voodoo and whatnot. I always thought it was strange, but she was otherwise nice. She passed away 2 years ago and left most of her stuff with me. One of them was... Oh, okay, I have a hard time saying this out loud, but it was a book of spells. Crazy, I know, but I'm desperate enough to try anything that might save me. There is this one ritual mentioned in here, and I think I'll make a go for it. Need time to get the ingredients, though. I'll be back later, I guess.
It was then that something weird happened. The accelerator seemed to be working on its own as my speed began to touch 80. I stepped on the brakes slowly, but found that it wasn't working, I began to panic.
Alright, today is December 17th, 2004. I don't have much time yet. Now that I'm sitting here, I'm really ready to do this. I honestly think I'm going crazy. I'm honestly concerned that maybe the cancer spread to my brain or something, though my latest scan shows there's nothing abnormal there. I can't cure my cancer per se, but there is a chance to stay on. The soul is eternal, but the body is temporary. At least, that's what it says.
The car begins speeding up even more as strange sounds come from the cassette. It sounds like chanting, but it isn't in any language that I understand. I slammed the brakes to no avail. The chanting goes on even faster, until at last, the guy shouts a large word at the end, and finally, the car begins to slow down on its own. My heart's pounding like crazy at the time, though nothing had happened to me yet. The image of me crashing into something kept playing in my head. As the car began to slow down even more, I make my decision, and the steering wheel suddenly jerked from my hands as if it had a mind of its own. The car stopped completely, and my seatbelt ejected itself. A voice from the cassette player screamed,
"Get out!"
I didn't need to be told twice. I got out as the car sped away, with no one in the driver's seat. I called my friend, and he said that the only issue he'd ever encountered was that it would sometimes misbehave occasionally. He didn't know anything about any cassette. I have my own theory on what happened now, though. Charles had somehow transferred his soul, or consciousness or whatever, into the car. Its headlights were his eyes, the wheels were his limbs, and so on. I can only guess that while doing that weird ritual, he also put a part of himself in that cassette by mistake, and so me putting it into the player completed him in some way, as he was joined up with the rest of himself. I learned my lesson, though. I carpooled for as long as possible, always offering money for gas, of course, and bought a new car later on. There was no way that I was going to repeat that same mistake. And to this day, there are occasional stories around my hometown of a phantom car with no driver which people encounter. It's become its own sort of urban legend. Of course, I know what it is. Just Charles roaming around, finally free of his cancer, finally free from the grips of death. Small-minded people have small souls, my grandmother Lisa used to say. So dream big, or you'll turn into a fly when you die. Then you'll live in the house of flies, forever buzzing around with the other small-minded people. Her Finnish upbringing made her honest, stern, and always on my side. She pushed me to realize my dreams, to speak my mind, and to always stay true to myself. But most of all, she made me fear the house of flies. The same way people would say, "Go to hell," Lisa would say, "Go home to your house of flies." The saying just doesn't have the same cadence in English, and it isn't as powerful when it isn't coming from an old, angry Finnish woman. Then again, I don't think I ever heard anyone else say it quite like her. As a kid, I used to have nightmares about the house of flies. Lisa built an entire world with her stories. She told me how all of the flies swarmed together in a black cloud, looking for something to make them human again. There were old rooms with bookshelves full of half-written books, a kitchen where wasted food rotted away, and a warm cellar where bodies would go to spoil and cool. There were other rooms mentioned in passing, but they were too many to keep track of. Looking back at it, it was just a made-up spooky story to scare me into becoming a proud and outspoken little boy. If my teachers had known where my rash attitude came from, they'd curse my grandmother in their prayers. But there comes a point where all little boys stop hearing how great they are, a point where their dreams and ambitions start to feel far-fetched, the point where they realize they can't all be astronauts, millionaires, and hockey pros. To me, that came in my late teens, just after my grandmother passed. When there are no voices left to counterbalance the abuse of ordinary life, you just listen to whatever is left. I did decently in school, but I failed miserably when I tried to pursue a higher education. I tried finding a job in my hometown back in Finland, but there was nothing available. As my remaining family distanced themselves, I found myself with nothing tying me down. So I did what my grandmother would have wanted. I cursed all of it to the House of Flies and set off on my own. I moved to Sweden and got a job as a night guard at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. It was mostly a nighttime gig, but I'd work extra whenever there was a large event on campus. It wasn't that exciting, but it was steady work and there was good pay. I think the company was impressed with my can-do attitude and work ethic. At that point, I wasn't completely broken. I had some faith, both in myself and my abilities. But over the years, that confidence was chipped away. Over 10 cruel years, I was faced with a string of failed relationships and a broken engagement. I failed to get a better place than a one-room apartment, and I'd seen all my colleagues move on to greater and better jobs. One guy, Jonas, won the damn lottery, almost €1 million. With that in mind, you might not be so fast to blame me that harshly when I admit that I eventually stopped trying. Walking those same halls night after night felt like a Sisyphean nightmare. Hour after hour of needless patrols, questioning drunk students and locking everything down. It was useless, and that work ethic I'd been so proud of started to erode. It was late September, not that long ago. The students were returning for the new semester, and I was back on my route. By now, I knew most of the custodians and faculty. Well, I'd been on a date with a lady in the cafeteria. But this particular night, I was done. Completely mentally done. I had no intention of making even the smallest effort. Instead, I was right here, on Reddit. I was mindlessly browsing through my recommended subreddits. I checked all my subscriptions, and now I just wanted to fill my mind with nonsense for a while. Finally, I just picked a random subreddit and started scrolling. I was on the 10th page of New when I ran across a title that stuck with me. Would you survive the House of Flies? At first, I thought it was a discussion about a book or a movie. The whole what would you do during an alien invasion kind of post. I checked the post out, but got stuck on the app loading some kind of picture. I just rolled my eyes when it turned out to be an ad for a dating app. Sail away. Never seen it before. But the comments caught my eye. Response after response, over and over, at least 40 comments, all saying the same thing. No. As in no, they wouldn't survive the House of Flies. Were they all familiar with the same story? In all my life, I never met anyone outside my family who'd heard about it. Then, without touching the screen, I saw myself post the same thing. No. There it was. My username and everything. It was already getting upvoted. I turned off my phone and got up. I finished the rest of my route in record time, rushing down the hallways. There was something about that post that reminded me of my grandmother and the sense of dread her stories put in me. They were so vivid I could have sworn I'd been there. I could almost picture the half-written books in the disgusting, rotting kitchen. If I'd been a talented man, I could have drawn it, painted, and make poetry of it. Something a small-minded person wouldn't do. Instead, I finished my route and was back home by dawn. The last thing I remember was stepping into the bottom floor of my apartment complex. 2 shadows moved in behind me. An arm forced me into a chokehold, while someone pushed something into my face. As I struggled, there was a blow to my nose. My eyes teared up as I felt someone lift my legs and my body surrendered. Up until this point, even the police believed my story. There's an open investigation into my kidnapping, and they claim to have a list of suspects. But honestly, I'm not convinced. It's been a bit too radio silent lately, and I'm starting to think they're only listening to a part of my statement. They're not looking closer at what came next, but it is no less true and no less important. I have a vague memory of a large, dark box. There were other people in there. A man was crying, and I think someone by the corner was dead. I was too tired to talk, but not too tired to listen. There were at least 4 of us, me included, and everyone was just as disoriented and scared as I was. I was naked, and I suspected the others were too. Maybe not the corpse. I could still feel cold skin against my thigh, but still my eyes couldn't focus. It was pitch black, and not a sliver of light came through. My nose had fractured so my eyes wouldn't stop tearing up, and I had to breathe through my mouth. There was this strange chemical smell in the air. Not quite chlorine, not quite ammonia. Something in between that made my feet itch. I think I was asleep when the doors burst open. There were armed men, all with headlamps and automatic weapons. They tied my hands with a sharp plastic string that cut into my flesh, and they forced my mouth open. I had to bite down on one of those bite guards that you wear at the dentist, the kind where you can't close your mouth, and they strapped it on tight. I was the first one out. There was a brief moment of pale sunlight before I fell into a dark cellar. I landed hard on my arm, and it knocked the air out of me. Wet dirt seeped into my pores. As I wheezed for breath, there were more bodies dropping all around me. My mouth was sore from the bite guard. As the armed men got to the person in the far-off corner of the box, I heard them talk in a foreign language. They just dumped him outside and closed the doors, leaving us in the dark. I guess he really was dead. I just saw silhouettes of the other 2. A slim ray of light came through a crack in the cellar door. I could barely make out the face of a middle-aged woman. Her eyes darted back and forth, and there was a stream of blood coming from her forehead. She must have had a bad fall. I scrambled to my knees, barely finding my balance. There was a strange rustling sound coming from the other side of the room, like a ball of rolling confetti. I tried to see it, but it was too dark. Instead, I backed away into a corner and listened. There was a man my age just a few steps ahead of me. As the rustling approached him, it exploded with activity. Suddenly, it became clear what the rustling sound was. Flies. A swarm of flies so tightly packed it was forming a liquid-like mass. Millions of fragile wings scraping against one another, bustling with anticipation. As soon as I touched them, they swarmed. From that single ray of light, I could see his face. Thousands of flies forcing themselves into his wide-open mouth, his ears, his eyes, and his nose. The entire swarm, driven by a single-minded purpose to intrude. I panicked. Hearing someone choke to death on 1,000,000 flies is something that will haunt me forever. I stumbled through the dark. I crashed into a shelf and broke my bite guard by accident. I spat it out, stepped on something sharp but just kept going forward. The middle-aged woman was right behind me. I could hear the flies spreading out across the room, as if to look for more victims. There was a flight of old wooden stairs. I scrambled up, feeling my stomach trying to escape through my chest. My entire body was surrendering to adrenaline, making me ice cold and burning hot at the same time. As I got to the top of the stairs, the buzzing was all-consuming. It was so loud and ever-present that I couldn't think straight. As I bit down on a fly trying to crawl into my mouth, I remembered my grandmother Lisa's words. They will do anything to become human again. I don't know how I managed to break that door. I just kept slamming against it, using my body as a battering ram. I got splinters and cuts all over my arm and shoulder, but the old wooden door at the top of the stairs gave way. As it did, The middle-aged woman caught up with me. The two of us fumbled into a dining room. It was old, probably from the 1930s. A simple metal vase stood atop a dining table with a hand-knit tablecloth. As I heard the mass of flies ascending the stairs, I grasped the tablecloth and covered the broken door with it. We gotta cover it up, I yelled. Find something, anything. My jaw ached from the bite guard, but I had to block out whatever was down there from coming up. It was such a bizarre sight to see that strange, naked woman still struggling to get her bite guard off. She was making this panicked, squealing noise like a wounded animal. With her hands still tied, she started going through 2 chests of drawers, looking for something to block the door with. A few flies were getting through until I covered the keyhole with my thumb. Tiny scratches tried to get through. The buzzing wings sounded like jet engines as they tried to get into my ears. Over and over, I managed to shake them loose. She came back with an armful of damp, moth-eaten clothes. Still, we were lucky they were damp. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stuck to the door quite as easily. After a few panicked seconds of using everything in the room, we had managed to barricade the door, seal it to the best of our abilities, and killed most of the flies that had gotten through. I had squashed no less than 4 against my own face. We just stood there for a while, gasping for breath. As I helped her off with her mouth guard, I noticed she was freezing cold. She couldn't take her eyes off the door, and the buzzing was still there. All those little lives looking to make things right, whatever the cost. We helped each other with the plastic strips. The woman picked up an old beige summer dress from the floor. It was a bit too big for her, but it was something. I found myself an old pair of dress pants. There were a few shirts, but they were too torn to provide any kind of warmth. They were just fabric now. "You okay?" she panted. "Yeah," I nodded. I think so." "I didn't do anything," she cried. I shouldn't be here." No, I agreed. "We shouldn't. I don't think anyone should." There was an arched doorway leading to an adjacent room. Restless, I urged her to follow me. Before I got through the door, I had this overwhelming feeling. I knew what was on the other side of that door as soon as I laid my hand on the handle. It was a study. 18 bookshelves lined the walls, tall enough to reach the ceiling. Old wooden floorboards covered in mismatched carpets. A big cedar wood desk with a typewriter covered in notes and first drafts. I'd been there before. It was just as I remembered it, the study in the House of Flies, full of half-written, ambitious drivel. A room where the talentless and uninspired could struggle to make a few coins on the side. Just as I remembered it, down to the mismatched carpets. Grandmother used to tell me the study was a place where all records were stored. Your unfulfilled life in a half-page in some forgotten book. The woman pushed past me and headed for the window. I closed the door behind me and started sealing the edges and keyholes with paper from the floor. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might buy us some time. This whole house was old enough to fall apart as it was. It'd only be a matter of time before the flies found some mouse hole to follow us through. It's nothing, she said, staring out the window. Swamp. Just swamp. The House of Flies, I muttered. There's nothing out there. The what? She yelled. You know where we are? As she stomped over to me, I nodded. I think, yeah, I said. But it couldn't be, but it is. Hey, she snapped her fingers in front of my eyes. Her hands trembled. Focus, where are we? It's hard to explain, I protested. But just... I held my hands against my head, as if to keep my thoughts in. This place was impossible. It couldn't be what I thought it was, and yet I could feel my naked feet against the wooden floor. No matter if I believed in it or not, I was still there. There's a kitchen 2 doors down to the left. We can't go there, I said. That's where they spawn. As my grandmother had said, the old rotten food attracted flies. That's where they came from. Whenever a small-minded soul died, that's where it would emerge as part of the swarm. I thought about what else there was. We could take our chances in the swamp, but it seemed to go on for miles. We'd probably freeze to death before the end of the day. I think there's an attic, I said. There's also the bedrooms, bathrooms, and the hallway. So, what do we do? She asked. How do we get out? I have no idea. We had to check out the surrounding area. The woman looked through the windows in the study while I moved into the adjacent hallway. There were a few flies escaping from the kitchen, but they seemed disinterested in attacking me. Instead, they just lolled about, looking for moist spots on the damp wallpaper. There was nothing outside, just swamp. The only way to get to the second floor would be through the hallway on the opposite side of the house. We would have to move either through the kitchen or the dining room, and neither were an option. But it was either that or the swamp. My feet were freezing from the wet, cold air, so I know I wouldn't make it very far. As I returned to the study, the woman was holding up a finger. I stayed quiet. There were footsteps coming from the dining room. Footsteps and a lot of buzzing. First, I thought the man I'd seen could have survived the cellar, but that couldn't be. I'd heard how the flies forced themselves into his lungs. He was dead. I waved the woman over. Our options were limited. Somehow, we would have to move through the kitchen. We stopped in the small hallway joining the 2 rooms. As I closed the door to the study, I saw the man from the cellar burst through the door. The creak from the door hinges hung in the air. His eyes were black and his mouth wide open from the bite guard. Flies were dripping from every orifice like leaking pipes, his swollen stomach moving like a sack of worms. This was it. This was how desperate the flies were to feel human. They'd wear us like a damn suit. I almost threw up, but I was pulled back. She grabbed my face, hard, and stared into my eyes. Get your shit together, she whispered. How do we get through the kitchen? I focused. I tried not to think about my lungs and my stomach filling with something moving inside of me. I wouldn't become that. Everything there is rotten, I whispered back. So if we're not, we'll stand out. What does that even mean? We have to fit in, I said, swallowing hard. We have to stink. Grabbing a broken curtain pole from a window, we peeked into the kitchen. I can't even begin to explain the stench. There was no way we could move through there without getting sick. We had to block our eyes, ears, mouth, everything, but we also had to fit in. Using the broken curtain pole, the woman managed to drag a half-eaten salmon out of the room. Rotten fish had its place in Scandinavian cuisine, but nothing could have prepared me for that smell. It was almost physical in nature, so warm you could touch it. The thing broke apart in our hands as we started smearing it on ourselves. Finding pieces of the broken curtains, I ripped them apart. I put some into my nose, some into my mouth, and some into my ears. I'd just have to close my eyes and my face would be impenetrable. I offered the remaining pieces to my companion, who reluctantly agreed. We entered the kitchen, keeping our eyes shut. I could feel flies batting against me. I couldn't feel the floorboards anymore. Instead, there was just soft meat. I could feel the texture of fish and innards slip between my toes. Something popped, like bubble wrap, and splashed against my legs. It irritated the skin, but I just kept my mouth and eyes shut, slowly breathing through my dew-filtered nose. It felt like an eternity, wading through that hellish room. Peaks and valleys, bone poking against the sole of my foot, warm blood dripping from the ceiling, teeth poking out of the walls as I leaned on them for balance. Something moving, joints snapping at me like a hungry mouth. Reaching the other side, my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't get a grip on the door handle. As my companion caught up with me, she pushed me away, ripped the door open, and collapsed into the hallway on the other side, dry heaving onto the floor. I closed the door behind us and took a breath of fresh air. I leaned against the wall and sunk to the floor next to her. We'd literally been knee-deep in gore. Now what? She spat. There are stairs, I said. Lots of rooms upstairs. So what? She groaned. How do we get out? There has to be something, I said. Maybe we can see a way out. Maybe there's something we can use. A lot of damn maybes, she said. I thought you knew the place. I thought you knew it here. Not all of it, I admitted. But we gotta try. Sure, she said, spitting. Let's try. The stairs weren't far off. While the house itself was severely water damaged, the stairs were probably the worst. Some planks were so soft I thought I'd stepped through them. If you stuck close to the wall and grabbed the railing, you could slowly make your way upstairs. But halfway up, my companion broke straight through them. She managed to catch herself by the railing as I reached out. Less than a second later, I could see the fly-filled man around the corner, but there were no eyes left. Only flies. A dark mass. We gotta... I started, but couldn't get the words out. I pulled my companion up next to me as the fly-filled man stared at us. My mind went into some kind of lockdown, and I found my thoughts looping on repeat. This won't happen to you. This won't happen to you. This won't happen to you. It was a loud crash that finally snapped me out of it, as my companion, holding onto the railing, purposely broke the staircase. It was so soft her foot went straight through. Come on, she demanded. Stomp. So I stomped, frantically, as the fly-filled man started making his way up the stairs. The bottom half of the stairway collapsed. He fell forward, flies spilling from his face as he hit the ground. The pallor of his hijacked body shone in contrast with the dark, wet planks below. My companion stared up at him as he got up, while I backed away. Leave us alone. Leave us alone, she demanded. Just screw off. Go. The two just stared at one another. I grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. You hear me? I said. Suddenly, he spat at her. One big black glob of flies. It hit her face hard and she almost lost her balance. This time, when I grabbed her, I didn't let her pull away. As we forced ourselves up to the top floor, it was clear that she was getting worse, and fast. She was coughing up maggots and constantly scratching her eyes. They seemed to bulge, and she started having trouble blinking. She leaned on me as we explored the room upstairs. Just bedrooms, bathrooms, and a pull-down set of stairs for the attic. As I pulled them down, she put her hand on my shoulder. Les, she sighed, her mouth starting to bloat. Les, no. She shook her head. No, go. She pushed me ahead and stayed back. The message was clear. I stepped up into the attic, alone. It was empty. A hole in the ceiling let a single ray of light in, but the rest of the floor was just empty. A pair of well-kept curtains were hung against a round window at the end of the room, but that was it. Downstairs, I could hear her gradually degrade. The crying and screaming eventually stopped, only to be replaced by the buzzing. I could hear the flies seeping through the floor. I had to do something, or I'd be next. There was nothing outside, though, just more swamp. I tried to swallow that sense of dread, but it just got worse. I summoned what little courage I had left. I ripped down the curtains. I tied a makeshift bag over my head so I wouldn't accidentally get any flies in my face if I dozed off. I hid in the corner of the room where I could feel water drip from a hole in the ceiling. And thus began the 4 longest days of my life. I stayed in that attic, surrounded by a swarm of flies. I managed to get drops of water from that hole in the ceiling, but that was it. I could hear my former companion and the fly-filled man stomp around downstairs, together, looking for a way to get to me. Luckily, they weren't that smart. Figures, as the fly-filled man didn't even attempt to open the door to the study. He just busted it down. It's hard to describe what that kind of threat and isolation does to you. You're so trapped in your mind that you stop hearing the buzzing, and you start to convince yourself it isn't real. You make up vivid images of where you really are in your mind, and you start imagining the drops of water tasting different. The hunger went from a nuisance to a pain. By the 4th day, I was shaking like a leaf. The attic was pretty warm, and I had some scraps of textiles wrapped around me like a blanket. Still, I was freezing, starving, and dehydrated, and that was only my body. I thought I imagined a car, that I could hear an engine. I forced my body to stand as I listened again. There was something out there, sounds I didn't imagine. There were less flies now, so I peeked through my curtain bag. It was so bright my eyes burned, but I saw them, a large white van, and there were masked men forcing people into the cellar. And outside, in the swamp, a thick fog. That was new. The masked men dumped 4 people down there. One of them struggled and got shot in the leg. The sound was so loud, so distinct that it must have been real. I've never heard that kind of gun before. They started screaming as the cellar door closed behind them. As the armed men got back in the van and drove away, I noticed something. There had been a dead person in our van, and that corpse was lying out in the swamp. The van had almost run over it, causing it to move a little in the moist grass. How hadn't I thought of that? The corpse was fully clothed, shoes and all. That might give me some time, were I to make a run for it. And tearing off my makeshift bag, I stumbled down the stairs of the attic. I brushed away the flies and just ran from the slapping feet of my former companion, coming to claim my life. I had to stop thinking. I had to ignore my instinct to scream. I just held my breath, brushed the flies out of my ears and nose, and pushed forward. I fell down the staircase, spraining my left ankle and stepping on a nail. Still, I pushed on. I hurried past the fly-filled man coming out of the study, past the kitchen, past the hallway, and out the back window. As my battered body hit the wet grass outside, I gasped for air. There was a buzzing sound, but it wasn't flies, just a few mosquitoes. Thank God. I limped forward, step by step. The ground was partly frozen, and I started to lose the feeling in my toes. As I got to the corpse, I was acting on unbridled instinct. I didn't care that his shoes were too small, or that it hurt to force my toes into them. I didn't care that his jacket didn't go all the way around me. I just needed something. I just needed layers. But I was being followed. My former companion and the fly-filled man were following me out of the home, side by side, like a couple straight out of a nightmare. Bellies extended like balloons, their skin turned to leather, flies crawling from across their nasty yellow teeth. They were coming for me, and with my body as bruised as it was, they were gaining on me. "Please," I coughed as I started limping away. "Please." The fog was growing thicker. They were coming closer. The buzzing around me grew stronger. The fog was so thick I couldn't see a log in front of me and I tripped. I scraped my hand on a rock, and my sprained foot didn't let me get back up without a fight. I saw the shadows of my attackers looming over me as I crawled forward, inch by inch, desperately trying to get away. I imagined more shadows stepping out of the fog to join them in the upcoming feast. "Please," I kept pleading. "Please." They were almost upon me. A hand grabbed my ankle, but I kicked it off. A few more pushes. That's all I had left in me. Then, the fog started to lighten. Looking behind me, they stopped. I'd reached the edge. I walked blindly for another 5 hours. As I reached a small road, I was picked up by an old man walking his dog. I was taken to a hospital, interviewed by the police, and treated for my injuries. I told them exactly what had happened, but they thought I was delirious. Being held like I'd been for 4 days would do that to you, but I know what I saw and experienced. I even described the fly-filled man and my lost companion. Indeed, there was a woman who matched that description that had been reported missing, but there was no way to confirm that that was her. I couldn't recognize her in the pictures. So how come I know the House of Flies? Well, I've since investigated it. My mother has a hard time believing this story, and she doesn't know what I'm even talking about. But it turns out I do have a history of disappearing. You see, when I was a kid, I'd gotten lost in the woods as my parents took me mushroom picking. I'd wandered off into the fog and been gone for 2 full days. When they finally found me, I was babbling on and on about a broken house, full of flies and people. I was dehydrated, hungry, and bleeding. My mother, fearing I'd suffered some kind of abuse, tried to make me forget about the whole thing. My grandmother had an idea, though. She figured that instead of trying to find out the horror of what really happened, she figured she'd just indulge my incoherent nonsense. She'd make a story out of it. All of it. Just something to make me believe it was all just a made-up nightmare fairy tale. So I guess I told this story to myself in a way, through my grandmother. The House of Flies was real all along, and this was the second time I'd survived it. Now I want you to ask yourself, and think about it carefully, would you survive the House of Flies? When most people think of demon possession, they picture the classic projectile vomiting, head spinning around variety. While that does happen, it's mostly novice demons who cause that. The vomiting and abnormal behavior being a result of the host's mind rejecting the possession. They're the little voice that tells you that you're fine to drive when you know you've had too much, or that you can cheat on your wife just this once, and no one will ever find out. Or if you've ever known someone with Alzheimer's who really got mean towards the end, you're like as not looking at the work of a demon. Dementia demons are mostly newbies, though. They do it because old, broken minds don't fight back, so it's pretty much impossible to screw up. And if you're in hell, you want good stats on your first possession. Otherwise, you'll get kicked right back to the back of the line, and you won't see another chance for thousands of years. Oh yeah, the line. Everybody in hell gets a number in the line, And the more evil you do with each possession, the better your place in line. So if you're lucky enough to get a possession, you'd better wreak havoc, and try not to get exercised or killed. It used to be hell trying to keep track of the paperwork of who went where, but things are running a lot more smoothly with the new computer system. We're still way behind Earth technology, of course. We don't get a lot of computer engineers down here for some reason. We've got plenty of salespeople though, but before you can even hop in the line, you've got to go through what basically amounts to Demon College. They call it a college, but it's really more like those corporate training seminars they have in America. Satan wanted it to be soul-crushing after all. Most of the introductory stuff is boring, like how to take control of the mind of your victim. That really is the foundation for everything though, because if you can't do that, your victim's mind will kick you right out and you'll be back in hell, at the back of the line, with a failure of possession charge on your record. And you definitely don't want that. The advanced stuff is where it gets more interesting, and you get to choose a specialty. Most people go into addiction because it's one of the easiest majors and you get a reasonable amount of time before your host ODs or just gets used up. Some people go into mental illness, but that can get you institutionalized, and you really don't get to have fun with your new body if you're stuck in a padded room all day. There's also a dictator class. Professor Hitler teaches that one, but not many people take it. Not only is it impractical, Hitler always ends up going on some tangential rant about Jews at the end of class. We get it, Hitler. You don't like Jews. Professor Bundy's class is pretty popular though. There are a lot of wannabe serial killers in hell, and it gives you amazing stats if you can pull it off on Earth. 10 or more victims, and you're allowed to jump the line and possess another body without going back to hell first. The last thing you should know about demon possession is how it happens. After all, you want to avoid it if you can. The most common is the Ouija board. People will accidentally summon up a demon, and by letting it control their hands, they allow their consciousness to overlap. The demon sneaks in through that window. If it's a particularly talented demon, it can fragment its consciousness and possess everyone with their hands on the board. The same thing can happen with a seance. Most demons will choose the weakest link, but some will be able to possess everyone in the room. Anyway, I'm afraid this is where my story ends. My host body is dying, and typing is getting pretty exhausting. But before I leave you, there's one more thing I want to tell you. The most ancient and skilled demons only need a tiny overlap in consciousness to possess you. They may only need to converse with you for a moment, or even just trick you into reading or listening to something. Maybe a story that distracts you just long enough for them to slip in unnoticed. You may feel uneasy or paranoid when it happens, or you may feel nothing at all. So, with all that said, how do you feel? Thanks to my last story, it looks like I'll be here on Earth for quite a while now. So, if you're curious, I can tell you a little bit more about hell. I'll also let you know about how I first got to know Satan. It's an important part of how I wound up where I am today, as one of the most skilled possession artists in hell. Besides, let's face it, you should be curious about hell. After poking around in some of your heads, I'm sorry to say that most of you will be going directly there when you die. It's not that you're evil or anything. It's just that God really doesn't like that kind of website. Even as a demon, I must admit that I was pretty shocked. I did forward some of the links to Satan, however. He's always on the lookout for things to base the new hellscapes on. What are hellscapes, you ask? They're sort of like theme parks, but instead of lighthearted fun in the sun, it's visceral torment and eternal despair. The lines are the same though, except in hell, you'd much rather be in line than on the ride. There are 7 main hellscapes, themed after the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, gluttony, envy, sloth, and wrath. There are also many smaller hellscapes based on whatever horrible ideas Satan can come up with. There may or may not be a tentacle-themed hellscape soon, thanks to some of the videos I pulled from your brain's browser history. That leads me into the first hellscape I want to talk about, lust. Lust is one of the older hellscapes, and it's also the largest. Marquis de Sade is in charge of operations here. Unfortunately, it's been under construction ever since 50 Shades of Grey was released. Hell's management wants the park to be ready for the big influx of lust-related sins when the Grey generation dies off in about 50 years. Right now, they mostly have relatively boring sins down there, like having the odd fantasy about your hot cousin. Yeah, that's right, don't worry. It's actually much more common than you think. Just kidding. You're a degenerate. But your personal sexual deviancy aside, I'll go on to tell you about some of the rides. Luckily for most people, your punishment is commensurate with your sins, and most people's lust-related sins are fairly mild. Things are a little worse for those who take advantage of women and children, though. There's the mandatory daily castration, as well as being forced to experience the assault from the point of view from each of your victims. The weirdest ride is being reincarnated as one of those free condoms that they hand out in nursing homes. I don't know who gave Satan that idea, but when he told me, he was practically skipping with excitement. He just loves stuff like that. Have you ever had a boss that seemed to get way too excited over stuff that nobody else cared about? Satan's that kind of guy. Only, you gotta pretend to be excited too, or he'll eviscerate your guts. And let me tell you, he loves eviscerating people's guts. The Lust Hellscape is the first hellscape I visited upon entering hell. This was back when the hellscape was much smaller, and I can still remember the stench as the gates opened and I trudged through them. The stench of stale sweat and leftover fluids invaded my nostrils and left me bent over, retching by the side of the road. When I saw what awaited me here, I turned and bolted away, but I was caught and carried in all the same. I'll spare you the details of what happened next. This was also the first time that I met Satan. It wasn't a terribly long meeting. He just told me how much he admired what I had done on Earth, and I gasped and choked on my own blood in answer. I just remember him laughing and walking off, shaking his head. Greed. John D. Rockefeller runs this hellscape, although Hell's management is considering replacing him with someone younger. They're expecting a certain prominent American politician down there very soon. The thing about the Greed hellscape is that it's mostly populated by people who were the elite of their society in their time. Commensurately, Satan created their hellscape to be shabby, even by hell standards. If you want to know what that means, just picture a slightly nicer version of New Jersey. The most popular ride in the Greed hellscape is the waiter ride. The damned are forced to experience the life of a waiter or retail worker in which every single customer is rude, but they can't quit because they need the money. After that, we have the third world factory worker ride. A lot of clothing manufacturers get sent to that one. Let's just say working your fingers to the bone isn't just an expression there. I spent a long time in this hellscape myself as a young demon, and it is the second on this list because it is the second time I got to meet Satan. He had just come to inspect a problem with one of the rides, the one where you slowly get buried alive by gold coins. Due to my egregious greed in life, I was in the ride when he came, and he was confused when he saw me. "I thought you were a wrath violator. What are you doing here?" he asked. "I've already been to Wrath," I replied, "for 200 years. 200 years? Jesus, what did you do again?" "If you want to know, you can read my paperwork." He looked at me for a moment like he was angry, and then he laughed. Oh man, not many people have the balls to stand up to me, you know. I respect that. He smiled and extended a hand, and we shook. and then he eviscerated my guts. Pride. Pride, vanity, or arrogance will land you here. This hellscape used to be rather small and unpopular, but with the rise of Snapchat and the selfie culture, the amount of vanity offenders is exploding. Arrogant, my opinion is right and everyone else is stupid types may find themselves here as well, which means a lot of people who spend their spare time arguing on the internet have a nasty surprise waiting in the afterlife. To atone for their pride on earth, the damned here have to do a lot of ass-kissing. And no, that's not a figure of speech. If you think you're guilty of the sin of pride, I suggest you cut off your nose and tongue, because you definitely do not want to know what a demon's ass smells like. The walls and ceilings are made of mirrors here, and the reflection you see depends on the degree of your pride in life. If you are just a little vain, you may only see your reflection from that time you had a really bad haircut or breakout. But if you were really proud, you get the whole face crawling with maggots treatment. The most egregious pride offenders mostly haven't made it down here yet, though. Apparently in America, they have this special kind of celebrity who everyone has heard of, yet no one actually knows why they are famous. Hell doesn't have an appropriate punishment for them yet, but Satan is working hard on one now. Maybe you have some ideas? If so, please let me know, and make it ironic if possible. Satan just loves poetic justice. Anyway, you probably guessed that this is the third hellscape where I met Satan, and you're right. I had just finished a 20-year stint as a slave when he came strolling up to me waving and smiling. "Johnny boy," he half yelled. "Good to see you. How long has it been?" "It's been 82 years, and my name's not Johnny." "Really? Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. James." "It ain't James either. What do you want, Satan?" He ignored my tone and wrapped an arm around me, grinning. "I was hoping you could help me with something, Jimmy. One of the rides in the new witch-based hellscape is broken, and the technicians are stumped. So, I thought to myself, who do I know that knows all about magic? My old buddy Jimmy, of course." He practically shouted the last part of my ear as his clawed hand patted me on the back more than a little too hard. I wanted to tell him to screw off, but I figured it was preferable to spending another 20 years working the fields for rich assholes, so I went along with him and fixed the ride. I'll wrap it up here for now, as I've already fragmented my consciousness into several bodies, and I'd like to go out and enjoy them. Sadly, I'm not talented enough to possess all of you, so the next time you have an urge to do something that you know you shouldn't, it may be me that's whispering evil notions in your ear, or it may just be your own human nature. But until that happens, relax. Read another story. No need to exert yourself. After all, a little sloth is no great sin. You probably gathered from my last story that Satan's role in hell is mostly managerial. He oversees operations in each hellscape, as well as appoints demons to head up departments and special projects. He's even considering diversifying and opening up a small chain of artisanal pastry shops on Earth. I know it sounds like a terrible idea, but nobody tells Satan his ideas are bad unless they enjoy being disemboweled. People say he was much more free-spirited and anti-establishment in his younger days, always ranting about overthrowing heaven, but that he changed after he settled down and had kids. Personally, it's hard for me to imagine a free-spirited Satan, but that was before my time. As for me, after I'd helped Satan with the last park malfunction, he had promoted me to ride technician, and now I got to visit the parks as a corporate employee, which was only slightly less worse than visiting them as a torture victim. After doing so well on the witch-themed hellscape, my next assignment was on one of the big parks. Envy. The Envy hellscape is reserved for people who sabotage others, or otherwise lie, cheat, or steal to obtain success. The corporate culture in America and unrestrained capitalism really helped fill this park out, with people who stepped on their co-workers' backs for a small raise and a lease for a slightly less shitty Ford Focus. People in this hellscape are sentenced to carry a literal knife in the back for each person they betrayed in life. The most ironic ride, and therefore Satan's favorite, is the one where they starve to death in a cage while watching others eat and drink outside. And this was the ride Satan wanted me to work on. I can still remember the conversation. "Hey, Jerry!" He flashed that big toothy grin he always had. "I was wondering if you could magic something up for me." "My name isn't Jerry, Satan. What do you want?" Haha, classic Jerry. "Hey, you know the ride where people starve to death?" "I guess I do now. What about it?" I wanted to know if you could make the food they eat cause them to shit fire. Like, literally. "Food? I thought you just said they starved to death." No, the other people. Come on, Jerry. If you pull my leg, I'll have to pull yours too. Except I'll pull it all the way off. He slapped his knee and laughed at his own joke for a solid 20 seconds before going on. "Just head out there and see if you can sort it out for me. All right, Jared?" I wondered if he really had forgotten what he had called me just 20 seconds ago, but I shook it off and made my way to the park. I had just finished placing a curse on the food when I felt a clawed hand clap me on the shoulder. "Hey, Gary, this looks great. Hey, I brought a guy from marketing over to take some pictures for the corporate website. Gary, meet Jeff. Jeff, Gary." Satan gestured to a defeated-looking demon with a camera draped around his neck. That's great, Satan, but my name's not. Never mind. Wait, hell has a corporate website?" Satan scratched at his goatee. Not yet, but when we get one, we'll want to have lots of pictures. If we don't show people the good bits of hell, nobody will ever want to come." "You want to recruit people to hell with pictures of them shitting fire?" "Exactly. Just like that restaurant Taco Bell on Earth." "Satan, I don't think Taco Bell makes people literally." "Anyway, we'll leave Jeff to do the boring marketing stuff. You're coming with me to Wrath to help me magic some awesome stuff up. Great place, Wrath. You ever been?" "I was there for 200 years. "No kidding. So, you know what I mean." Before long, we arrived at Wrath. The gates creaked open and I shuddered as I caught a whiff of the all-too-familiar stench of blood. "So, here's my idea, Gary. Are you ready for this?" "Probably not, but go ahead." 2 words, Gary. Human shish kebab." "Human shish kebab?" "Yeah, just picture it. We stick a bunch of people on a stick with some bell peppers, maybe some cherry tomatoes. We could even use different colored people to make it look nice." What? Okay, but you need magic to hold the stick?" No. I already got a guy for that. Hey, buddy, yeah, you. Come over here. Gary wants to meet you." My jaw dropped as the man who jogged over was no less than 10 feet tall and full of solid muscle. "Gary, I'd like you to meet my good friend, Gollum. Gollum, Gary, Gollum." "It's Goliath." I jumped at the sound of the stranger's booming voice. Goliath, are you sure?" "Okay. Anyway, Gary here's gonna help me magic up your stick to keep people from falling off into the fire all the time." Satan turned to me. "We can only keep people on the damn thing a few weeks before the stick rips his way right through them. Anyway, you two sort it out and holler when you're done. I've got an important phone call, so I'll just be right over there." With that, he jogged off, and I began my work on the stick. I glanced over when I was finished to see Satan laughing along with a young demon college student, twirling her tail around with his fingers. We're done over here, Satan," I yelled. He jogged back over, grinning. Great stuff. Come on, Gary," he said, throwing his arms around me. He leaned in close and started talking in a low voice as we walked away. His breath smelled like coffee and brimstone. Yeah, you may want to watch your back around Goliath," he said furtively. "And I wouldn't bend over around him either. It's a little too tempting for him, if you know what I mean." "You mean he's, That's right, Gary. A cannibal." "Well, I don't really... Wait, what?" "Yeah, I lost 2 technicians to him last week. Ripped their heads clean off, spine and all. And he's not too happy with you either. You're the one that fixed it so he couldn't tear people off the stick anymore." "Wait, but you just... Hold on. Why wouldn't I bend over in front of him because he's a cannibal?" "What? You never heard of rump roast? Jesus, Gary, you're a little slow on the uptake sometimes." Okay, Satan. So, where to next?" "Gluttony, Gary. You're gonna love it there. It's great. Just great." "Okay, so what do you want me to do there?" 2 words, Gary. Exploding cheesecake. Gluttony. As Satan and I approached the gluttony hellscape, I noticed that it was quite a bit smaller than the others. I had never been to this hellscape, and I wondered what sort of grim horror awaited me inside. Despite what I had seen in the other parks, I couldn't help but gasp when the heavy iron gates creaked open. The inside was filled with long tables laid out with an exquisite feast. Huge racks of lamb, mountains of mashed potatoes, even ice cream that somehow resisted melting in the hellfire around us. "This is gluttony?" I asked. "I don't get it. Where's the punishment?" "They're always hungry, Glenn," Satan said excitedly. "And every time they take a bite, they only get hungrier." Okay, I got it. We let them eat real food eventually, though." "Wow, that's nice of you, I guess." "Yeah, once their relatives die off, we feed them the bodies." "Oh, okay. But, how is gluttony a sin? I don't get that either." Satan laughed and strolled over to a small, fat Asian man in flashy sunglasses shoveling mashed potatoes into his mouth. "This one's name is Kim Jong-il." The man gulped as Satan clapped a hand on his shoulder and dug his claws. "He let thousands of his people starve to death while he feasted in his compound surrounded by guards. Even when other countries tried to send food, he kept it just so he could stay in power. How does that food taste now, Kim?" Satan's claws dug in deeper and the man yelped a little louder. I stared at the fat, sad little man and shook my head. "Do you think he likes cheesecake?" I asked. Satan grinned. As we were leaving Gluttony, Satan handed me a handkerchief to wipe the exploded remains of Mr. Ill off my shirt. Satan, I'm starting to think you're not such a bad guy after all." He nodded knowingly. You're getting Stockholm Syndrome, Glenn. Just don't go falling in love with me. I've already got 17 wives, and I'm not looking for a husband." "Okay, so where to next?" "Where else?" said Satan. "Sloth." Sloth was another park I had never been to, so I didn't know what to expect when we got there. The gates of hellscapes always opened slowly, but it took at least a full minute for the colossal gates to creak their way open here. I heard a sniffing sound and looked over to see Satan snorting a line of white powder off the end of his tail. "Satan, what are you doing cocaine?" "Cocaine? Cocaine?" Satan laughed deliriously. "Don't be ridiculous, Peter. This is ground-up hellhound bones. Cocaine is like decaf compared to this stuff." He patted me on the back about 10 times too hard, and then shoved his tail under my nose. "Go on, Peter, have a bump. You're gonna need it in there." "I don't really." Satan flicked his tail and left me coughing in a cloud of the stuff. My lungs felt like they were on fire as I breathed the powder in, until I was sure I was about to die, when all of a sudden my whole body went numb. I looked over to see a 3-foot wide grin on Satan's face. which now appeared to be the size of an SUV. "Are you feeling it now, Peter?" The world was swaying and bending around me, and the air felt like jelly. Everything seemed to slow down as every atom in my body vibrated with intense pleasure. I was definitely feeling it. As we walked through the gates, I felt a sudden weight push down on my body. "Gravity is 12 times stronger in here, Peter," Satan yelled. "Keeps the residents moving slowly. Cool, right?" I looked around, and the people in the park were indeed moving at a snail's pace, many of them with one foot suspended in the air, almost frozen in the middle of a step. "We've been having this really weird glitch, though, lately. Hey, Kierstenix, show Peter here the glitch." I looked over to where Satan was shouting, and I saw an enormous mountain of a demon with ram's horns and thick black fur all over his body. He grunted and yanked on a giant lever he was standing next to, and the gates began to creak closed behind us. Splat. The sound was deafening as every resident in the park simultaneously collapsed like a building falling straight to the ground, spraying blood and viscera everywhere. "See, when the gates close, the gravity shoots way up and we have to unplug it and plug it back in to reset it. It's super annoying. We haven't been able to use the main gate for weeks. Help me out, huh, Peter?" I'll see what I can do." I cleared away some of the brain matter in what looked to be someone's spleen, and got to work drawing my runes on the ground, thankful for whatever the hellhound bones were doing to keep me from going splat like everyone else. I looked over to Kierstenix when I'd finished. "Okay, try it again." Kierstenix yanked the lever and the gates slowly dragged their way back open. Hold on a second, Peter. We need a guinea pig." Satan ran out and grabbed a passing demon, dragging him into the park as he protested weakly. "Satan, I've really got to hand in these reports, and the deadline is..." "Forget about the deadline. You're going to be part of something greater than yourself here. This is experimentation. This is science." "But Now, Kierstenix." The big demon yanked the lever. The gates creaked closed, and... nothing. The demon's face relaxed and he let out a long sigh of relief. "Anyway, Satan, Splat." His sentence came to an abrupt end as Satan bashed his head in with a rock. "Woohoo, yeah, 10 points, Satan yelled. "Sorry about that, Steve. I just got so disappointed when he didn't go splat." I stared at him in disbelief. Hey, Steve." He started elbowing me in the ribs and giggling. "Steve, looks like he met his deadline after all, huh? Get it?" Satan started laughing hysterically. "Oh, yeah, haha." "Hey, can I ask you something, Satan?" "Sure thing, Jason." "Why is it that you can never seem to remember my name?" "That's a great question, Barry. Great. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. You see, I'm an ethereal being, Barry. Do you know what that means?" No, not really. Obviously. It means I make all the girls go crazy. But it also means that I exist in 5 dimensions, Jackie. 5. That's almost all of them." "Wait, how many dimensions are there?" "Don't ask stupid questions, Gerald. I'm trying to explain something here. See, you exist in 3 dimensions, and then the 4th is time. But I exist in 5, which means that I can walk through time like you walk through a hallway. You feel me, Gerald? You picking up what I'm putting down? You catching what I'm throwing? You getting where I'm going?" "You're saying that you're a time traveler." "Don't be stupid, Eric. Time travel is impossible." "But you just said..." "I know what I said. Listen, do you know what happens when you try to travel through time, Billy?" Your mind shatters into a trillion tiny little pieces, Andy. So tiny, you can never put them all back together again." "So that's what happened to you?" "That's what happens to you, Jeff. I'm gonna teach you. We're gonna break your mind into so many tiny little pieces. It'll be great, Jacob. Great." "Why would I want to?" "Because then you can possess the souls of hundreds, even thousands of people at a time. I do remember your name, Willie. I just don't remember what time I'm in." "That doesn't make any sense." "It only doesn't make sense if you think about it, Alan. Don't be a buzzkill, all right?" "So you're saying the names belong to people whose souls I'm going to possess?" "Exactly, David. You are those people. Just not right now. Anyway, enough of that. Do you like white wine, Brent? Actually, I prefer. Great. Come on over for dinner. I've got big plans for you, Richard. Huge. Satan's castle loomed enormous and gray in the distance. As we approached it, we saw dark thunderclouds overhead, and a cold rain began pelting down. I've never seen thunderclouds in hell before, I said. That's right you haven't, Harry. I had my thunder guy hook it up. Gives the place a real evil sort of vibe, you know what I mean? Yeah, actually it. Do you like hot tubs, Harry? I died before they were invented, so... Great. You're gonna have a blast, Harry. We walked up to the giant wooden doors, and Satan rapped his knuckles on them rhythmically. Who dares approach the Dark Lord's castle? I nearly jumped out of my skin as the huge bellow caused the doors to shake in their frame. It's Satan. Open up. What is the password? Just open the damn door, Fears Now, before I break it down and rip your damn throat out. The doors began to slowly creak open, and I silently wondered why no one in hell ever bothered to oil their door hinges. Welcome to the depths of the abyss. I could hear the booming voice echoing throughout the hallways, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. I'd like you to meet Fursnell, Harry. Harry, Fursnell, Fursnell, Harry. My eyes followed to where Satan was pointing, and I saw a small demon standing at my feet. He couldn't have been more than a foot tall, and he looked like a baby with horns. Nice to meet you, Harry. Nice to meet you too, Frazzle. Fears Now. Right, Frizzle. The demon baby had opened his mouth to say something, but Satan cut him off. Have you seen my wife, Frizzle? She is in her room. The demon baby shot me a dirty look as Satan beckoned me up the stairs. Come on, Harry. My wife is really friendly. She's great, Harry. Great. Not bitchy like the other 16. We summited the stairs and Satan knocked on a heavy stone door. Honey, are you in there? No answer. Satan slowly pushed open the door, but the bare stone room was empty except for a bed and a large fish tank. Ah, great. There she is. Satan strolled over to the fish tank and plunged his arms deep down inside, splashing water all over the floor. He pulled out an octopus and stuck it in my face. Crystal, honey, I'd like you to meet my good friend Harry. Harry, Crystal, Crystal, Harry. This is an octopus, Satan. Whoa, easy there, Larry. That's my wife you're talking about. I mean, sure, she can be a bit of an octopus sometimes, but we're in love. Okay, is she gonna join us in the hot tub? Don't be ridiculous, Larry. She's an octopus. The heat would kill her. Right. Satan gingerly placed Crystal back in her tank, and we left the room and set off down the hall. I've got a couple of girls to join us, Larry. You like squid, right? I prefer human girls, actually. You want to eat human girls for dinner? Wow, you're a sick son of a bitch, Larry. I like it. No, Sadly, I don't have any extra human girls besides the ones joining us in the hot tub. Oh, thank God. You're in hell, Larry. God is the last person you should be thanking. He was right about that, I guess. Come on, Larry. It's this way. Satan beckoned me down a pitch-black hallway. As we walked through the darkness, an eerie feeling began to settle on me like I was being watched. The walls around me seemed almost like they were breathing somehow. Hey, Satan, I whispered. Could you maybe turn on the lights? Oh, I don't know, Larry. They really don't seem to like that. And personally, I can't stand the screaming. That definitely didn't help. Please? Okay, Larry, but don't say I didn't warn you. Satan clapped his hands twice and the hallway burst into light as the torches on the wall lit up. Except they weren't really torches. Hundreds of bodies were nailed to the stone walls, and their heads had all just burst into flames. They all began screaming at once. The noise was inhumanly terrible.
They're human torches, Larry.
Satan yelled over the sound.
You get it? Like the movie?
I wondered if Satan devised his torture techniques with a book of puns and a dartboard. When we got to the hot tub, it turned out that there were actually 2 girls waiting for us. They were both tall, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and looked like they had just stepped out of a Victoria's Secret catalog.
Hey, girls, I'd like you to meet Larry. Larry, girls, Reggie. Hi, Reggie,
They both said, smiling.
Well, go on, Reggie. Get naked.
Satan knocked me off balance with a particularly strong pat on the back. The girls were looking at me expectantly. What the hell? I said, tearing off my shirt and pants.
Whoa, he actually did it. What did I tell you, girls? Reggie's crazy. Crazy. I've got some swim trunks over there for you, man. Put that thing away before you hurt somebody.
Satan stripped down to his boxers and splashed into the tub, while I pulled on the trunks and shamefully slinked into the water.
Hey, Reggie, I didn't mean to embarrass you,
Satan whispered.
I didn't know about your problem.
My what? What problem?
Come on, Reggie, we all saw it. No use pretending. It's okay. The girls have seen all kinds of weird physical deformities before. They used to work for Dr. Mengele.
Satan, I have no idea what you're...
Okay, girls. You're clearly making Reggie uncomfortable because of his weird penis problem. Why don't you leave us alone? Just go away to my bedroom.
No, Satan,
Don't worry, Reggie. I got you covered,
he said, throwing his arm over me as the girls got out of the tub.
We'll get that sorted out for you. I'll give you Dr. Mengele's card. He's great, Reggie. The best. You're not Jewish, right? If you are, don't tell him.
Okay, Satan. You said earlier that you brought me here for a reason?
Yeah, George. We're celebrating the completion of my master plan. Good job, George.
What? But I haven't done anything, Satan.
You haven't? Wait. What time am I in?
The present?
Oh, shit. I hate the present. So much to do. We should go to the future sometime. It's great, George. Great. Everything's already done there.
Just tell me the damn plan already, Satan.
Whoa, the ball's on this guy. Okay, George.
Satan reached down into the water and pulled out a large kitchen knife.
First, you and I are going to have to link our souls. Do you know how that works, George?
Where the hell were you keeping that knife?
Exactly, George. I just need to carve a rune into your chest. Just hold still for a moment. Whoa, Satan, hold on, Son of a bitch!
Satan had gripped my shoulder with one hand and begun carving the rune into my chest with the knife. By the time he had finished, I was on the verge of passing out, and the hot tub water was tinted pink with blood.
It looks great, George. Great. I'm really sorry about that, but I lost my permanent marker. Oh, wait. There it is.
Satan plunged his hand down into the water again and pulled out a Sharpie, which he used to start drawing an identical rune on his own chest. My head was swimming, and my vision started going black at the edges. Satan, I'm feeling kinda...
I know, Brian. I'm excited too. Now, we're officially best friends forever. But now that that's out of the way, let's talk about my evil plan.
Everything went black as I felt the warm water close over my head. When I woke up, I was staring at the ceiling. I breathed out a sigh of relief at the fact that I wasn't dead. That relief was short-lived, as Satan poked his head into my coffin. Wait, why was I in a coffin?
Hey there, sleeping beauty. Looks like we don't have to bury you after all. You were about to... But enough sleeping on the job. We've got work to do, Joey. But I still don't know the plan. But I just told you, Robert. What? You mean while I was unconscious? Exactly, Robert. Exactly. So when the time comes, your unconscious mind will just know what to do. But that's not... You know what? Never mind. Whatever. Whoa, so gloomy all of a sudden, buddy. Because you... Don't worry, I brought just the thing to cheer you up. Satan, I really don't think that. The girls are here with me, buddy, and they're all ready for you. I'll just step out of the room and leave you to it. Satan, I don't... Oh, wait, really? Of course, buddy. Your old pal Satan's got your back. You said you wanted to eat human girls for dinner, right? Oh, I really hate you sometimes, Satan. I love you too, buddy. Go ahead and eat, and then let's get you to the soul port. You're first in line when the next soul opens up for possession. I'm not really hungry, Satan. Let's just go. Sure thing, buddy. Satan took me to the soul port, and though he wouldn't shut up the whole time, I couldn't get him to tell me about his plan. He just kept saying that when the time came, I'd do what was needed. Well, the time must still not have come, because I have no idea what to do. I'm just glad to be on Earth for the time being. That being said, though, he did tell me a good bit about ethereal beings on the train ride to the soul port. You seem like the kind of people who'd be interested, so I'll relay the things he said to you now. He said that ethereal beings existed in 5 dimensions, not including time. He also said that they could see other planes of existence, but not travel between them, that they were too large for the gateways. He said that the gateways between planes lie in the intangible. When I asked him what that meant, he said that meant that the gateways were held in the minds of a plane's inhabitants. That's why atheists don't go to hell. Because they don't believe in it, the gateway remains shut to them. Lastly, he said that Jesus was an ethereal being just like him, and the reason that he was able to travel between planes was because of the Bible. Though it wasn't as widely spread back then, Satan said it was much more specific. He said it conveyed the true nature of God much more accurately than the Bible today. So much so that the God people thought of when they read the Bible was almost the same as the real God. He said that that widened the gates in people's minds enough to allow God to send a part of himself to Earth. The last thing he said before he left me at the soul port was that he was much smaller than God, and for him to get to Earth would require a lot fewer people to understand his true nature. That if there were some sort of Bible for Satan, some sort of written or spoken work that would let people imagine just what he was truly like, that the gates would widen enough to let him through. Can you imagine him now? After Satan sent me through the soul port to Earth, I only got to enjoy the quiet life for a few days before he came literally crashing through my window. I've seen a lot of strange things in my life, but I don't think any of them will ever top a blood-covered Satan in the middle of my living room with a giant shard of glass sticking out of his head. "Whoo-wee," he said. "I made it. I think I calibrated the jump a little wrong, though. But this is still Mars, right?" Satan, how did you? The powerful magic of best friends, Jake." Satan ripped open his shirt to reveal the still inked-on rune, along with several shards of glass sticking out of his chest. "I also hijacked a bunch of people's minds to widen the gates between dimensions, then shatter my consciousness into pieces small enough to fit through. But it was mostly the best friend stuff." "But why?" "Customer outreach, Jake. Heaven is killing us in new customer growth rate this quarter. If we want to have any hope of catching up, we're going to need to be proactive." "What do you mean by... Wait, who's running hell?" "I got a guy, Jake. He's the best. The best. Used to work customer service for Comcast. Really knows how to make people suffer." Okay, so customer outreach is... Come on, Bernie. It's like you've forgotten everything from your Welcome to Hell orientation seminar. You know, I worry about your memory sometimes. But I didn't have a large duffel bag came crashing through my other living room window. "Great," said Satan. "The recruitment materials are here. You know, you could have at least aimed for the same window." "Tell me about it. Here, Bernie, carry this." Satan shoved the duffel bag into my arms, and I felt something sharp poke me in the chest as the contents of the bag clanged metallically. "Ah! Wait a second. Is this just a giant bag of knives?" "And hammers, Bertram. Don't forget about the hammers.
But why do we need... oh no, I am not helping you murder a bunch of people just so you can get more customers.
We prefer to call it aggressive marketing. We rebranded it, Denny. All the big companies rebrand when they want to do something terrible to make money.
This isn't hell, Satan. The rules are different here. You can't just kill a bunch of innocent people for no reason.
Whoa, innocent? What, are we recruiting for heaven?
I hope not.
Their dental plan is shit, Denny. Shit. We're recruiting people for hell. We're killing rapists, murderers, people who don't pick up after their dogs. The worst of the worst, Denny.
Oh, well, I guess you could argue ethically that...
Exactly, Denny. And the priority is serial killers. We don't want them sending any more innocent souls to heaven. We're already way behind this quarter.
Oh, so it's kind of like that TV show.
Exactly, Dexter. It's just like that TV show, I Love Lucy.
I don't think I saw that episode.
Really? But it's the best one. Lucy's daughter is kidnapped by terrorists, and she goes on a rampage with a sawed-off shotgun. I won't tell you how it ends, but everyone dies.
Okay then, but how do we know? Another crash came through the window.
Jesus, Satan, how much of your stuff did you bring?
This is the last thing, Denny. Satan tore the canvas bag from around the package that had just arrived to reveal an aquarium with an octopus inside.
I had to invite my wife, didn't I? She's the best one. The other 16 are total hags, Denny. But please try not to make any more racist comments while she stays here.
But I didn't.
Okay, the first stop is a Mr. Reginald D. Wilson. Really sick son of a bitch, Denny. Don't turn your back on him for a second, or he'll put a knife in it.
I'm not really sure about this, Satan.
Just stick to the sales pitch. You'll be fine.
Satan handed me a crumpled up piece of paper with what I hoped were coffee stains all over it.
Congratulations. You've won an all-expense-paid trip to hell. Please contact the Dark Lord Satan for travel arrangements. That's when I pop out of the bushes and bring the hammer down, Denny. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Or literally. Either way, really.
So, what's the point of the script exactly? Satan threw his arm around me and whispered,
Crystal's head of sales, and she worked it up. Just be a pal and pretend it's really good, okay?
But how did she...
Don't be racist, Denny. Octopuses are people just like you and me. Now come on, let's go kill this guy.
We drove like a bat out of hell all the way to Reginald's house, screeching to a halt as soon as Satan spotted the place.
All right, Denny, you're gonna be great. Great. Just follow the script, and everything will go according to plan.
Okay, what did this guy do again?
Don't ask stupid questions, Denny. Just go give your pitch.
I stepped out of the car somewhat hesitantly. When I made it up to the front door, I glanced back to see Satan enthusiastically giving me finger guns. I knocked on the door as softly as possible, praying that nobody would answer. Yet, right as I was about to turn around, the door swung open.
Hey, who are you?
Reginald D. Wilson was chubby, with thick glasses and a polo shirt. I glanced down at the script in my sweaty hands.
Congratulations, you've won an all-expense-paid trip to hell. What? Is this some kind of screwed-up joke? Who the hell?
Surprise! Satan yelled as he sprung up from seemingly nowhere. He clapped a hand on the man's shoulder, and the man shrieked as he disappeared in a column of flame.
Good job, Daniel, Satan beamed. Let's go to the next pitch. But first, we should probably let the woman out of the basement.
You know what, Satan? Let's do it. Reginald D. Wilson shrieked and rattled his chains as a giant pitch-black demon beat him with a whip.
Wow, the reception's really great on this, huh, Garth?
Yeah, I didn't know hell had a TV channel.
I had the guys set it up before I left so I could keep an eye on things. It's mostly torture now, but we're also thinking about adding in some original programming. Maybe some sitcoms, a couple police procedurals. We've got a lot of great TV producers down here in hell.
Satan stared at the TV, grinning as the demon swung Reginald up by the feet and began smacking him against the walls. Is anything else on?
You can just say you don't like my TV show, Garth. No need to pussyfoot around it.
Satan flipped the TV to the local news. The anchor was in the middle of some sort of breaking news story.
Say they were rescued by what appeared to be some sort of monster, along with a pale, sweaty man. Police have released this sketch of the two.
A rough sketch of Satan and I flashed on the screen. Satan, what are we going to do about that?
What are we going to do? Get laid, Del. Earth chicks go crazy for celebrities.
But the police. What are the police going to do, Del? Arrest Satan? We'll be fine. If you're going to be such a wimp, we'll just erase their memories next time. Wait, you can erase people's memories? Of course I can, Del. Do you remember being raped by that giant tentacle monster in hell? No? Well, you're welcome. Not that you ever said thank you. Okay, but how are we gonna... Satan shoved an axe into my hands. This time, it's your turn to do the killing, Del. Satan, I really don't think... Come on, you heard how they described you on the news just now. Small, skinny, weak-chinned, effeminate. But they didn't actually say any of that. It was implied, Del. But next time, they'll be describing me as a pathetic human meat sack, and you as a handsome, statuesque monster with a 3-foot Johnson from hell. Don't argue with me, Del. We've got people to kill. Oh, right. So, who's next then? Jason P. Johnston. He runs a clothing line that uses sweatshop labor. 4 kids died in Malaysia because of him last month alone, Del. Children are pure souls, Del. Pure. Do you know how much heaven's stock goes up when a kid dies? Heaven has stocks? Don't be stupid, Ted. I'm speaking metaphorically. Are you ready to go kill this hump or not? I guess so. I mean, he is killing kids after all. Great. Let's go. When we arrived at Jason P. Johnston's address, we were greeted by a huge white mansion with a large iron gate out front. Wow, sweatshop labor really pays off, huh, Ted? I think I'll start running hell with people like Jason P. Johnston. We can even start our own clothing line. It'll be great, Ted. Great. People still wear human skin, right? Sorry, Satan. I don't think so. Really? What a waste. What do they do with you when you die? Just dig a big hole in the ground and chuck you inside? Actually, that's exactly. Humans are ridiculous. Next, you're going to tell me they just throw healthy organs away while people are dying of disease. All right. Looks like he's got an intercom. I need you to pretend to be a sexy lady, so he'll let us in. Okay. Wait. Why do I have to be the lady? Come on, Ted. You heard what they said on the news. You're a nice guy, Ted, but you're basically just a 12-year-old girl with an Adam's apple. But they didn't. Satan buzzed the intercom and Jason P. Johnston's voice came through. Hello? Who's there? Hi. I stammered out in an unnatural falsetto. I'm a sexy lady. Satan started snickering and the voice came through the intercom again. I can see you on the camera, jackass. Oh, in real cute devil costume. You know Halloween isn't in June, right? Screw off, or I'm calling the cops. Good job, Ted. You blew it. Now we've just got to give up and go kill someone else. Satan adjusted the rearview mirror and started backing out of the long driveway. Sorry, Satan, The car lurched forward as Satan slammed on the gas, and we smashed through the gate and skidded onto the lawn. Come on, Ted. I'm just messing with you. You heard him call me cute, right? We're going to kill this hump twice, Ted. Twice. The seatbelt jerked me back as the car crashed through the front door. Satan popped the trunk open and leapt out of the car while I fumbled to undo my seatbelt and fell out onto the ground. Here, Ted, Satan said, tossing me an assault rifle. You take the little gun. Satan yanked a huge minigun out of the trunk and chaotically sprayed a burst of rounds through the home. Jason P. Johnston, I'm calling you out. He paused for a moment and waited. Huh, I thought that would work. Nobody ever has the balls for a standoff anymore. All right, come on, Ted. I can smell him this way. Satan ran off with the minigun, and I chased after, hugging the assault rifle to my chest. When we found Jason P. Johnston, he was huddled in the corner of his bedroom, shaking. He threw his hands in the air when he saw us.
Look, just take whatever you want, okay? Just take what you want and go.
Oh, we will, Jason, Satan grinned.
Go on, Ted. You know what to do.
Right, I said, shouldering the rifle.
Wait, what are you doing, Ted?
Satan asked. Killing him?
No, the sales pitch, Ted. Read the sales pitch.
Oh, I patted my pockets. I must have left it at the house.
Oh, wow, Ted. Crystal's gonna be so disappointed. And she already doesn't like you after all those racist comments you made.
Sorry, Satan.
It's okay, buddy. Let's just kill this guy, and we'll talk about it when we get home.
Oh, right. We both turned to look at Jason P. Johnston, still huddled in the corner. His mouth was hanging open loosely.
What the hell are you guys?
He said. I tried to think of a cool one-liner. Something Satan might say, but I couldn't think of anything. So I just shot him in the head. Satan grinned at me.
Come on, Ted. Let's go home and watch TV. There's a new show I really want to check out.
Jason P. Johnston's cries for mercy were muffled out by the avalanche of tiny feet as he was repeatedly stomped to death by children. Satan sat there glued to the TV like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. Satan? Yeah, buddy. You said children were pure souls, right?
Of course.
So, where did you get children in hell?
That's a great question, Derek. Do you want to order pizza?
Yeah, I guess, but you didn't answer.
Great. Just put it on your credit card.
Okay.
You see the way little Lucy stomps on his face like that? She's great, isn't she?
Which one is Lucy?
They're all named Lucy, Derek. It's easier to keep track of them that way.
What?
I've got at least 7 kids with each wife, Derek. That's a lot of kids to keep track of. I can't go calling them by the wrong name all the time. It would affect their self-esteem.
But naming them all Lucy was a stroke of genius.
My first wife wanted to call them all Satan Jr. Can you imagine? What a hag.
Satan turned up the TV as one of the kids picked up a rock and violently bashed Jason P. Johnston's skull in.
I admit, said Satan, Lucy 47 is my favorite. I know. As a parent, you're supposed to love all your kids equally, but...
There was a sickening crunch as Lucy 47 tore out Jason P. Johnston's spine and held it up to the camera. Her skin was almost pure white, and her eyes were solid black like a doll's. As I stared into those black eyes, I became aware of the sensation of air being sucked out of my lungs, and my whole body began to feel heavy. I could feel blood vessels starting to pop in my neck, and I strained to turn my head away, but I found that I could no longer move. All of a sudden, the air rushed back into my chest. Satan had plunged his hand into the TV, but instead of breaking, the glass began to ripple like water as he pulled a small, pale arm through. As he continued to pull, I saw the rest of Lucy 47 climb through the screen and into my living room. Satan grabbed a big pair of sunglasses and handed them to her.
Here, put these on, honey,
he said. The girl didn't say anything, and she just put on the sunglasses and stared at me. I was laying on the floor gasping for breath.
Oh, come on, Brandon. You look like a trout over there. Come on, get up and let's go out. We've got people to kill.
I managed to steady my breathing. So you don't want the pizza?
Just order it. We'll bring it with us.
You want to bring pizza to a murder?
Technically, it's a sales pitch, Derek. There just happens to be a murder at the end of it.
After we got the pizza, Satan had me sit up front so I could hold it open on my lap for him to eat and drive. Lucy sat in the back and stared out the window. Are you sure this is safe, Satan? I asked as we narrowly sped by another car.
Don't worry about it, Donnie. The explosives in the trunk won't go off unless we crash.
I gulped. There are explosives in the trunk? Are you serious?
Of course, Donnie.
Cars screeched to a halt around us as Satan ran a red light.
How do you expect to blow people up without explosives? Who are we going to blow up? The sex traffickers, Donnie.
All right, fine, but maybe we can be a little discreet this time?
Let me think about it, Donnie.
Satan paused for a moment.
Nah.
Satan turned around and started talking to Lucy.
Lucy, honey, are you ready to go kill some people with Daddy?
Lucy didn't say anything. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that she had removed her sunglasses and was staring out the window. Birds were dropping from the sky behind us. When we got to the location, I saw that it was an out-of-the-way house in the woods. There were a bunch of Jeeps and big black SUVs parked outside. There was an armed guard posted at the door with an assault rifle.
All right, Donnie,
Satan was whispering now.
You wait in the car. I'm going to put the explosives by their back wheels for when they start to run.
He punched me in the shoulder and handed me a video camera and some binoculars.
Get some good footage for the website, all right?
Satan slipped out of the car, and then he was off, carrying little metal discs that looked like mines. He moved around the compound silently, dropping mines around the wheels of the Jeeps and SUVs. When he was done, he grabbed onto a branch and climbed into a tree. I wondered, was he just going to watch? If so, then what were they going to be running from? I put the binoculars up to my eyes and watched the armed guard. That's when I saw Lucy. She looked like a ghost as she strode smoothly through the clearing. The guard seemed just as confused as I was when he spotted her, and he reached for a walkie-talkie at his waist. That's when Lucy took her sunglasses off. The man suddenly froze in place. I watched as his face twisted up with pain. The blood vessels in his neck started to turn black, bulging and bursting with the black fluid that sizzled and burned as it flowed over his skin. Lucy cocked a fist back like she was going to punch him, but instead, she threw her fist straight through his stomach, bracing herself with the other hand. She ripped out his spine with the head still attached and tossed it aside like rubbish. Men rushed out of the house, and the forest erupted with gunfire. Lucy's tiny little body shook as hundreds of bullets collided with her. She shrugged the onslaught off like rainwater, leaping from man to man and tearing them apart like paper, littering the ground with their organs and dismembered limbs. The men started to throw down their guns and jump into their cars to drive away. The ground shook and trees fell as the mines went off, sending burnt flesh and shattered glass everywhere. When it was all over, Lucy stood there among the bodies in a singed dress and silently turned to look at her father. Satan hopped down from the tree and walked over, patting her on the head.
Come on, honey,
he beamed down with fatherly affection.
Let's go get some ice cream.
In my last update, I introduced you to Satan's favorite daughter, Lucy 47. Some of you were curious about her background, and I admit that I was too, so I asked Satan about it, hoping to answer some of your questions. Satan told me that Lucy's mother was one of the many demons that immigrated to Earth while the war between heaven and hell was still raging in full force. Though all the demons were conscripted to fight in the war, many of them ended up deserting. Some were simply hoping to escape the conflict without having their soul obliterated. But some came to Earth to torture humans, taking advantage of the fact that heaven didn't have spare troops to dedicate to their protection. As some of you guessed, Lucy 47's mother was in fact the demonic equivalent of a Gorgon. According to Satan, mankind's mythical depictions of Gorgons, vampires, and many other monsters are actually based on the demonic creatures that plagued their ancient civilizations. The exploits of the particularly infamous demons are included in a tome called the Encyclopedia Satanica. The entry for Lucy 47's mother indicates that she came to Earth in the 734th year of the war. I'm not sure what that translates to in Earth dates exactly, but it was during the era of the ancient Greeks. According to the encyclopedia, the Greek myth of Medusa is based in large part on her murderous torment of these people. Now that your questions have been answered, I'll move on to the next part of what has been happening with Satan and I. Lucy 47 sat in the living room texting on her cell phone. Had I not witnessed her tearing apart men like tissue paper the day before, I might have mistaken her for a normal Earth teenager. Hey, Lucy, do you know when your dad is getting back? She didn't say anything. She just looked over her sunglasses at one of my houseplants. The plant hissed and let out a black smoke as it withered away. Okay, I guess I'll wait. About 30 minutes later, Satan burst through the door grinning. All right, Mel, you're gonna love this. I just got off a conference call with the management team in hell, and we've come up with a much more efficient way to do this thing. Really? Absolutely, Mel. We're gonna bring a team of top murderers, salespeople to Earth, and task them out to increasing our customer growth rate. So, you want to bring a bunch of monsters to Earth so they can kill people for you? Once again, Mel, I want to remind you that we prefer the term new customer recruitment, but that is the basic idea. Okay, so you want to pull them all through the TV like we did Lucy? Don't be ridiculous, Mel. We can't just pull any demon through the TV. I can only pull Lucy 47 through because our souls are already connected as father and daughter. Oh, so how do we get the rest of them to Earth? That's a great question, Mel, and it leads me to the next thing I want to talk with you about. The management team feels that your talents aren't really being fully utilized in your current position. Okay. Are you saying I'm getting a promotion? More like a reassignment, but you can call it a promotion if it makes you feel better, Darren. Okay, sure. Does this mean I'm not going to have to kill people anymore? Yes, Darren. Your new position will not entail any homicidal duties. All right, well, sign me up, I guess. Great, Mel. Just hold still for a moment. Satan pulled out a gun and shot me in the head. I hit the ground hard and sputtered and coughed as the sulfuric air filled my lungs. I was back in hell. A column of flame rushed down from the sky next to me, and when the smoke dissipated, I saw Satan standing there. All right, we're gonna need you to help magic some stuff up down here, Darren. Think you're up to the task? I tried to talk, but just wound up doubled over in a fist of coughing. The air quality in hell is terrible. Great, Darren, great. Our first stop is Lucy 47's mother. I'm gonna warn you, Darren. She's a total bitch, but she's my wife, so be nice or I'll have to kill you again. I managed to squeak out, Okay, Satan. The road to the Gorgon's castle was lined with spikes, each one topped with a rotting head. She's got a weird fetish for a decapitation, Darren, so be careful. Ever since some asshole cut her head off on Earth and she got sent back to hell, she just started lopping human heads off. She goes through like 40 a day. It's ridiculous. Wow, that seems like she really holds a grudge. Absolutely, Darren. She's very racist against humans, kind of like you are against octopuses. So try not to provoke her by doing any of that weird human stuff you do all the time. Wait, what do you mean by, great, we're here? As we crested a hill, I looked up to see a giant pile of skulls arranged into a pyramid. It was 90 feet tall if it was a foot. Satan shook his head. I have to apologize for my wife's crappy decor, Darren. I mean, really, like, a pile of skulls? It's a little on the nose, isn't it? Who's it supposed to scare off? Girl Scouts? Does she have a grudge against Thin Mints, too? Yeah, totally lame, I said, trying to keep my heart from beating out of my chest. As Satan knocked on the door, I suddenly remembered that I couldn't look at his wife in the eyes without dying. The door swung open, and I looked right underneath where her face was. The neckline of her dress plunged all the way to her belly button. Jesus, Darren,
You meet my wife for the first time, and the first thing you do is stare at her rack? What a human, huh, honey? You can look up, I heard a soft voice say. I looked up and beheld the Gorgon. She had milky white skin and chocolate brown eyes, plump black lips, and long, sleek black hair. She was gorgeous. Wow. She smiled at me. Nice to meet you too, Darren. I'm Maddie. So, I'm not gonna turn to stone then? No, I can control it, she coughed. But it, looks like part of you has already turned to stone. What? She looked down and my eyes followed. I had a massive erection. Oh, no, that's just, sometimes when you change dimensions, the magic. You have a magic erection? No, it's just hard to think with all that blood in the wrong head, huh, Brian? Satan chimed in. Satan started laughing. Oh, this guy, huh? A typical human, right? Don't you just hate it when they do that weird human stuff? I don't think anybody would blame you if you just decapitated him right now. Maybe later. I've still got some leftovers from yesterday in the fridge. Would you like to come in? Actually, Satan, I'd rather... Don't be rude, Brian. My wife just invited you in. Maddie turned back and waved us inside. Her hips swayed back and forth as she led us up the stairs to the main hall. Are you staring at my wife's ass, Brian? What? No, I don't even... What? Maddie turned around and smiled. Give him a break, Satan. He's only human. Are you hungry, Brian? Yeah, famished, actually. Great. Humans eat other humans, right? Actually, I think I've got some snacks in the car. Don't worry about it. If you say so. I guess we can just get right down to business then. The bedroom's this way. Bedroom? Here, she said, holding the door open for me. Satan will wait outside. I looked at Satan questioningly. Well, go on, Brian. We don't have all day. All right. I went inside and stood awkwardly by the wall. Maddie came in and sat down on the bed. Is the bed okay? She asked. I guess so. Good, she said, patting the spot next to her. Come sit down. I did as I was told, sitting down on the bed next to Maddie. Listen, Maddie, I don't really know. My voice disappeared as she shrugged her shoulders, and her dress fell off, exposing her breasts. Okay, she said. Do you want me sitting up or laying down? Laying down, I guess? Okay, I guess that makes sense. I know they're kind of large, sorry, I know that makes it harder. Harder? Yeah, drawing the rune on my chest to help me get through the soul port. It must be easier with a flat surface. The what? Oh, right, the rune. Of course, let me, just get my marker. Is that it right there? No, that's my... Maddie just stared at me blankly. Oh, I'm sorry, it's your penis again. I'm just not used to seeing them that small. Are all humans like that? I don't know. I fished the marker out of my pocket and drew the rune on her chest. Great, she smiled. Can you send Satan in when you leave? I want to say goodbye before I go to Earth. Okay, sure. You may want to go downstairs. We can be pretty loud. Just help yourself to something in the fridge, okay? Yeah, all right. Satan and I pattered our way down the path that cut through the dark woods around us, though to call them woods might be a little generous. Rather than tree bark, the trees seemed to be coated in slimy black scales.
The leaves looked like ragged pieces of skin and were oozing a thick black substance down to the ground below. Satan had explained that they were vampire trees. Vampires, he had told me, as undead creatures were incapable of reproducing the same way as humans. These trees were planted with a mix of both magic and vampire blood, and over the course of a 1,000-year lifetime, the little bits of ragged skin knit together to form a vampire fetus. I didn't ask him what that might look like. Satan gestured to one of the trees in front of us.
Look at that one, Jed. It's a Transylvanian-Romanian hybrid. The scales are really magnificent, aren't they?
Sure. I wasn't sure which tree he was referring to. They all looked exactly the same to me.
You don't have to pretend to know what I'm talking about, Jed. We both know you don't know a dick about vampire trees.
Right. Satan picked up the pace a little.
We're gonna meet an old friend of mine, said Satan. He's really sensitive about his teeth, so try not to say anything stupid.
Why? What's wrong with his teeth?
There's nothing wrong with them, Jed. Like they say, it's not the size of the fangs that matter. It's how you use them.
Oh, so it's sort of like guys and their,
No, I don't know. What?
Penises. Satan grinned.
I did know, actually. I just wanted to make you say it. Yeah, it's pretty much the same, really. Just something girl vampires say to make you feel better.
Oh, okay. The forest got thicker and thicker with vampire trees, so much so that the black fluid dripping down started running off in little currents. I couldn't even see the castle ahead when we finally reached it, the only thing visible beneath the treetops being the large wooden door and 2 torches on either side that cast an eerie light over it. Satan rapped his knuckles on the door, and it opened to reveal a waxy white vampire in a bathrobe. His hair was unkempt and brushed the tops of his shoulders, and his eyes looked like little blue ice chips.
Hey, good to see you again, Stu, said Satan.
Stu grinned wide to show off a mouth full of white teeth and 2 of the biggest fangs I'd ever seen. Satan gasped.
Whoa, Jesus, Stu. It looks like you whittled down candy canes. Where did you get those?
Fang enhancement surgery, he said smugly. Got them from a tiger with a bad overbite.
They look great, buddy. Anyway, this here is Jed. Jed, Stu, Jed.
Hi, I said stupidly. So, what kind of name is Stu for a vampire? It's great, isn't it? He smiled again, showing every single tooth in his mouth when he did. My birth name is Dracula, but I wanted a name that really struck fear into the heart, So I had it changed to Stu. All right then. Anyway, Stu turned around and beckoned us to follow him inside. Why don't you come sit down for dinner before we do the ritual? I didn't see how I could refuse without risking disembowelment, so I silently nodded my assent, and we made our way to the dinner table, where I dreaded seeing what a vampire's idea of dinner was. I was surprised to see the giant tables laden with all sorts of delicious-looking things. There was a steak still sizzling from the grill, giant wheels of some sort of white cheese, a few dozen bottles of wine, and some sort of soup that let off a thick smell of garlic. Satan rubbed his hands together and grinned.
So glad to see you finally given up that weirdo diet, Stu.
Stu shook his head. I haven't given it up, he replied. This is just for you guys. What sort of diet are you on? I asked. Stu sighed miserably. All vegan, he said, lifting up a little bell from the table and giving it a shake. I wondered how a vampire could be vegan, but my question was quickly answered as 2 huge vampires carried in a screaming and kicking man in a Che Guevara t-shirt. They slammed him down on the table in front of Stu, knocking over a few wine glasses in the process, and Stu bent down to feed on his neck. The screaming abruptly turned to gasping, and the man's body began to shrivel up like a raisin before finally going still. I'd grown used to seeing this sort of horror, and I was more curious than anything. "So, Stu," I said in between mouthfuls of mashed potatoes, "what's the point of a vampire going vegan?" "Regular human blood has too much cholesterol these days," he said blandly. "The full fat does taste so much better, though," he added in sadly. Most of the rest of the dinner was finished in silence as we respectively devoured our meals. I went through 2 8-ounce steaks and an absurd amount of garlic mashed potatoes, while Satan had the marinara farfalle and 3 bottles of wine, and Stu had 2 more vegans. Afterwards, I drew the same rune on Stu's chest as I had on Maddie's. She was right. Drawing the rune was much easier with a flat surface and no throbbing erection. "All done," I said when I'd finished. "Great," said Stu. "Satan and I are gonna head off to the Soul Port." He eyed me with a look that was suspiciously similar to hunger. "What's your cholesterol like?" he asked, cocking an eyebrow. High," I said hurriedly. Really dangerously high." He looked unconvinced, but just then Satan clapped him on the shoulder and whispered something in his ear that sounded a lot like hepatitis. I opened my mouth to protest, thought better of it, and waved them goodbye as they left.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hey, is this thing working? Can they hear me? Satan, what are you doing and who are you talking to? What's it look like I'm doing, Glenn? I'm breaking the 4th wall. I'm talking to my biggest fans here. Don't be rude. What? Never mind what I'm doing, Jake. It's ethereal being stuff. Okay. Anyways, thanks for listening to the series, everybody. And shoutouts to some of my biggest fans. Nikki London UK, Mysterious Mark, Amber Cochran, Mr. Freaky Story, Dr. Grimm, Enlightenment World United, Chaotix, Mahe Shrivastava, Man Dizzlefo Shizzle, Insomniac CP, A Hawaiian Shirt, Selena Burkett. Goodness gracious, Satan, how long is this list? Don't interrupt me, Barry. It's bad decorum. And anyways, I got a lot of fans, man. King of Hell, Father of Lies, and Rock and Roll and all that. Let's get back to it. Christopher Scales, Summer Strangeness, Spooky Garrow, and Italia369. If I left anybody out, then my bad. I'm not omniscient like the guy upstairs. I'm an ethereal being and all, but I can only do so much. You gotta comment on the video so I can remember you. I slowly raised my hand after being chastised just a moment ago. Yeah, Barry, speak up. This isn't kindergarten. Anybody else you want to thank? I looked at him, hoping he would get the hint. I mean, I was an integral part of this whole operation. Of course. You didn't let me finish. Thanks 1,000 times over to lifeisstrangemetoo, the incredible author of this awesome story. He's got a playlist on the channel with more of his stories, and be sure to check out his Reddit page and Facebook for more of his awesome work. Links in the description down below. Now, back to the other guy. Thanks for listening, everybody. And if you like what I'm doing, leave a like and a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button for more Nightmares Nightly.